So will this be on your Facebook? Should I?
No, it's going to be on YouTube. I'll post the link to Facebook in just a minute. Just give me a moment here. Okay, I have a link. Looks like shit. Because Zoom sucks. All right, hold on one second. FYI, we're live right now, so just so you know. Yeah, and I can't even stream it to Facebook because Zoom, again, doesn't let me do that. So we're just doing YouTube. I just posted it. Let me tag you.
And stream it to Facebook because Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, I shared it around. Now my fan is going, which is a bummer.
Did you find the link?
I did. I shared it around, so I'm good. Yeah.
Okay, give me one moment here. I'm just sharing the link with on the page and everywhere.
Sorry about my fan. It just starts intermittently and I can't do anything about it.
I'm looking for the post. It's like way down here. I post too much stuff.
Still waiting.
1 second. Okay. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I'm just getting sharing all the links and everything.
Would
So
you
if
like
you're watching, so those of you who are just now joining us, we wanted to do this on, well, I didn't want to do it on Zoom, but Alison wanted to be able to share her her slides, and the program I have doesn't allow you to share your slides. I tried to get it set up a certain way, but it didn't quite work out. There were some technical issues. So I'm trying to get it worked out. But we just had to revert back to Zoom, which Zoom sucks because it doesn't let you stream to multiple places. It's the video quality is reduced, and but we can share the slides, which is good, this is the most important thing. So I had to create a new link. And so I'm just now sharing this stuff. So just give me one moment and then we'll get started here. Thank you very much. Okay. So we got that.
Jason, could I start just letting people know what we're doing, or?
Yeah, you can talk. You can talk. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, so I guess this is recording now, right?
Yes, we are recording.
So, so anyway, I want to thank you, Jason, for offering your platform. I was invited to be part of a day-long sort of discussion presentation group in Utica, New York last weekend. And Jason has been so lovely with me, trying to get me sort of set up with tech support, and had sent me this small wearable microphone, like lavalier microphone, digital recorder. And I thought I was recording what I had said in the talk so that I could put it together with my slides, but it turns out the only bit that got recorded was the last hour of the Q&A of that event. So in that case, it felt like the universe was just saying, hey, like, you should do this over again online. And I think even that event was somewhat rushed. And so our plan, I think, is I have about 170 slides at this point. It's a lot of breaking it across 2 days. I mean, who knows, it may go even a little bit longer, but to make space for people to sort of pause, and for people to be able to ask questions and for clarification in a way that wasn't really possible during the presentation that I did last Saturday with Tom Cowan and Andrew Kaufman. So that's sort of what we're doing today, is the part one of this. And I have added some additional slides of material that I've been pulling together with input from other people over just this past week to give it some context. And I think that's about where we're at right now. So, you know, I've added a little bit on the front end just to explain some of my, some of the framing work that I've been doing on social media this past week, and to sort of explain to people what that rationale is in light of having had a lot of learnings over the last weekend in collaboration with local folks in the upstate New York area that really sort of helped move along my thinking in some areas. So Jason, are we still waiting or?
No, we're good. I've got it all sent out to everybody, and yeah, so we can go. I'll just go ahead and introduce. My name is Jason Bosch, and as many of you know, I've been doing many things with Alison McDowell, and like she said, she did this presentation, and I thought it would be good to do like a more long form where we actually have time, because a lot of times when she does it live, anyways, it kind of gets cut short for time. And so the nice thing about this is we can actually take your questions, and unfortunately, we're just on YouTube. We're not on Facebook, but I will be monitoring the comments on YouTube, as well as I'll be checking the comments that are on the Facebook too, to see if there's any questions. But preferably, if you can direct your comments to the YouTube stream, if you have a YouTube account, that'll be best. And I'll collect those questions for Alison, and we can stop in between the presentation. We broke this up into 2 days. That way we have time to really answer your questions and really do a deep dive into this. And a lot of this is pretty new to me. I've just been, starting to familiarize myself with this whole nanotech. And honestly, I don't really want to know all that stuff. I'm not excited about this.
Eat your vegetables, Jason.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to this.
Broccoli with a side of kale.
Yeah. But I know it'll be informative, and I know that Alison has done a ton of work, a ton of research on this. So yeah, thank you. And please, as we're going through, ask a question. And if you want to put question in all cap, because sometimes the comments, people start having conversations and then I can accidentally miss that it was a question or whatever. So but yeah, if you want to post questions, or if there's things that you're not sure about as we're watching this, do that, and then I'll collect those, and then periodically we'll ask Alison your questions. That way she doesn't have to monitor the comments while she's giving her presentation. So with that, I'm gonna jump off the screen here for a minute and let Alison take it. Thank you so much.
Oh, I need you to help let me screen share.
Oh, 1 second.
Okay. Oh, wait a minute, not desktop. Is it?
Okay, I just switched it, so it should give you the choice.
Share. Oh, okay. Let me do present. Oh, look, somebody's in here. Okay, that's good. All right. Yeah. So thanks for joining in. Like I said, I have some sort of preface material. I call this talk New York Nano, Maple Nation Transmutes the Neurotech Empire. And I will say I started out when I was invited to give this talk with the intention of giving a different kind of talk that was largely about looking at the history of a particular company, MITRE Corporation, which was tied with Air Force research and frequency, research and development, and defense contracting, and has later shifted over into Medicaid. And looking at that as tied to sort of Cold War and cybernetics and social engineering, really. And that's sort of what I had started out with. And then about a week before I was ready to give my talk, a lot of the information around graphene started to surface. The group of scientists who are working in Spain, what they were able to document doing the electron microscopy around graphene and the implications for what's been unfolding. And so I really pivoted this past week into incorporating that new material. And I will say, if those of you who follow my work, my typical wheelhouse has been around finance, human capital finance, sensor networks, blockchain, gamification, and sort of digital surveillance, and how all of that meshes together. And so my strength, I haven't waded too deeply into the health tech space beyond how it relates to the finance piece. And I've known about issues around nanotechnology, and I've touched on graphene based on Celeste Solom's introduced me to it in last November, but I didn't really have a solid framework to hang it on. And so a lot of this work actually stems from a collaboration with a friend who blogs at a blog. It's a collaborative blog. It's called A Piece, like a piece of a puzzle, A Piece of Mindful. And it's the section of the blog that's under Steppers. And so Steppers has been working very diligently over much of the past year to investigate electrical engineering, nanotechnology, and various elements of that in the health space, and has written some really solid articles investigating a section of the narrative that is not, most people are not taking a deep dive into. And so a great bit of this, I owe a debt of gratitude to this person for sharing their information. And they've actually been really immersed in graphene for over a month, maybe 2 months before even this news broke. And so I'm advancing this from a place of building on work that was done by others. And so I'm sort of sharing this in a spirit of collaboration. Okay, so here's my preface. You know, some of you guys, if you follow me on social media, you know, I'm a bit, I guess I can be a bit prickly, and I'm generally not here to, I don't know, maybe grow my audience or win friends and influence people. But I do think that having clarity around the nature of the problem is really important. And I'm not here to say that my version of this narrative is the version, or that you should believe me any more than you believe other people per se. But I think the nanotechnology and the graphene aspect is super important for people to get a handle on. And we each need to be responsible for our own research. And our movements will be better off as we actually dig into this material for ourselves and figure out things for ourselves. So
Hey, Alison, real quick, just a little housekeeping thing. You shared your whole screen, which shows your mouse, which is good because then if you want to point something out, you have your mouse on the screen.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure if you wanted that. But also it'll show anything that's on your screen. So if you get a call coming in, a text, you know, I know sometimes that happens. It's up to you. But the nice thing is it'll show your mouse. That can also be a negative thing. You may not want the mouse on there. But it'll also show.
I don't really know how else to do it, Jason. Honestly, you want me to stop the share and try it a different way?
Yeah, if you can share the actual slideshow. It gives you options with the screen share. You can share the slideshow. So if you share the program, it'll show you on the screen share. It'll show you a screen share like desktop screen or whatever, or you can say share.
Google Chrome, is that what it is?
No, you're.
I don't have anything that says slideshow.
Oh,
I have desktop. I have Google Chrome. I have.
Oh, you're doing that from the web?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Google Chrome.
Okay. Oh, whoops. Well, that's not what I want either. Stop share. Let me go back to what I had, because I think that seems like it'll just be whatever. Okay. Darn it. Now I've lost it. Oh. Okay. I guess we can edit this part out.
Yeah, I'm gonna take this live stream and make a better version of it afterward.
I don't even know what this all is. Sorry. Shoot, this is really annoying. Can you see it now? You're seeing the slide share?
Yes, I do.
Okay. All right. Let's just stick with this. Okay. Okay. So anyway, back to the presentation. So anyway, what I'm trying to do here, at least in the preface, is to raise up the issue around graphene and nanotechnology and frequencies within the context of what we are experiencing around this biosecurity state, and to give people some clarity. And again, if you follow me, you know I'm not presenting this from a place of nihilism. This can be super overwhelming, and in many respects, as I've said, I feel like this is a moment of reckoning, right? So the universe has said, you know, step up. Are you going to be the human beings coming from a place of heart, or are you going to step back from that? Are you going to step up, or are you going to step back and hide from this? And so I don't find this terrifying. I find this, for me personally, it's better to have the information than not have the information. But I understand that not everybody wants this information, but I'm hoping to share it from a place of being empowered and having clarity. And a lot of you know that I look to the teachings of John Trudell, who is a leader in the American Indian movement, and he talks about the power of the water, right? That each human being is a raindrop, and when enough of us become clear and coherent, then we have the power of the storm. And if any of you have seen my YouTube channel, some of us had this pretty amazing experience on a hilltop storm on the solstice over the Susquehanna. And so, yeah, the power of the storm is quite powerful, and we should move forward in that direction. So this was the conference. I had a hand in sort of helping frame the language around this, and we called it the viral panopticon public health prison planet. And what I really wanted to convey in my talk and in this preface is this idea of virology being a very tactical and strategic choice to coerce global systems change that are tied to this fourth industrial revolution. Okay, and that virology as a field was chosen, I believe, with intention for not just our current moment, but for this idea of perpetual pandemics and biosurveillance moving forward. This is a tweet I put out yesterday. And again, I've come into this space I came in as a mom fighting for public education. And then I became a mom who started to understand about poverty management and the nonprofit industrial complex. And then I began to understand about electronics and the digital world and defense contracting, right? And it keeps getting bigger, but I did not come into this from a health space. And many people with whom I built community over the past year are far more advanced in their understanding of the history of mainstream medicine, Rockefeller medicine, allopathic medicine versus holistic and more spiritual medicinal practices, and this idea around viruses, right? And so as we work to attain clarity, there are the two opposing theories, that the idea of germ theory and terrain theory. And what I've come across is that in doing this work, you have to be willing to really reflect in a very critical way on the teachings you've been immersed in since childhood and the histories, and understand that the histories are structured, the narratives for a particular purpose, for a particular end, often by the winners, right? The winners of those in power. And so the program that I was part of was with Tom Cowan and Andrew Kaufman, who advocate a terrain approach. And I think over the course of the past year, as someone who works in an area of the city that is experiencing terrible environmental toxicity, it's very clear that environmental toxins cause great harm to one's physical health and mental health. And, I'm pretty much in the terrain theory camp at this point. And that was important for me in terms of who I'm choosing to align with, because I feel like the environmental toxicity is the key element. And that my understanding at this point, and it continues to evolve, but is that nanoelectronics and electronic frequencies have been weaponized as an environmental toxin. And this is something that I think most people in the environmental movement, this stuff has been in development for at least 2 decades and is not commonly understood within environmental protection space. The idea of nanotechnology and electronics and frequencies as toxins to not just human life, but all of life, and as disruptors beyond the chemicals that we know of and other elements that are harming the environment. So that's really important. Understanding that this next phase of the spatial web is a scenario in which your material body as a physical thing that is in space will start to merge in an electronic field with other things, with other living things, that the world will become part of a ubiquitous computing simulation. And it will just start blurring, like the edges of everything will blur into everything else. And if you look up the Internet of Bio-Nano things, Ian Achildes at Georgia Tech has done a lot of work in this area, and they imagine that your thoughts just manifest and influence other things in your environment, and that everything is seamless and integrated, but then you really lose the you that is you as you physically know it, and then it gets all merged into electrical signals, essentially signals intelligence. And that my framing is understanding that as an imperial project, as a project that goes back probably at least as far as the Roman Empire, is that the domination, the nature of that domination has changed. And now that it is happening in ways that are almost invisible to us, which is the element of nanotechnology and also virology, is that to our ability of sensing things in the normal spectrum of the ability of our senses to access that information, it's beyond that. And so in existing beyond that, we have to then rely on the experts, right? The air quotes experts who have been credentialed into the system. And so those elements I think are really important in framing where I'm coming into both this talk and this past week, is understanding terrain theory, understanding frequency, understanding ubiquitous computing, and understanding that as a military campaign. So I will just pause for a second, Jason. I don't know if anybody has questions at this point.
Yeah, I just had the one question, which was from Silly Boy. With frequencies, do you mean EMF?
Well, it includes EMF, but I think can happen in a lot of different ways. So it's waveforms, signals and waveforms. So, but inclusive of EMFs, but also light waves, photonics, a lot of other stuff that they have going on, which I'll touch on a little bit later in the talk. So when I talk about clarity, as I've mentioned in previous discussions, Michael Crow, president of Arizona State University and founding board chair of In-Q-Tel, the venture capital arm of the CIA. At Arizona State, they have a Center for the Future of War in which weaponized narrative is key, and a primary funder of their activity in that space is by New America, whose money is also Eric Schmidt and Google Alphabet. And so I want to sort of put this out up front, is that, as of, this is not quite 20 years ago, but the Department of Defense is imagining that the future of war is really information warfare, information-based warfare, and that it's happening in the context of a cyberspace, and that a huge part of the information warfare is based in psychological operations. And so you can see, I'll just, this last paragraph says that we must improve PSYOP. Military forces must be better prepared to use PSYOP in support of military operations, and the themes and messages employed in the PSYOP campaign must be consistent with broader national security objectives and national level themes and messages. Currently, however, our PSYOP campaigns are often reactive and not well organized. And so if we understand living our lives in digital platforms, both social media and even the way in which what we're doing today is living in a digital space, that we become more and more subjected to digital manipulation, electronic manipulation within the context of psychological warfare towards certain ends. And so we have to understand the nature of the engagement that we're occupying and the tools of choice that are being used. So I will say, when people are consuming media, myself included, like, just be very discerning about the messages that you're hearing, and the fact that that which is said versus that which is left unsaid indicates how narratives are shaped. So I'm being pretty upfront about my narrative at this point. This week, I feel like very strongly that, based on the information I have at my disposal currently through my own work and the work of a number of people that I respect and trust very much, that the core issue here is neurotech weapons and frequency, right? And so if we look and see the narratives that are coming out now, even into the mainstream space, for a while it was confined in the alt media narratives, but now it was surfacing in the New York Times and other spaces about gain of function and biowarfare. And if we understand that in this space of engagement, and if it's an energetic engagement, right, the forces that be, the powers that be, use to their advantage, keeping people in a fearful space, keeping people at a low energy frequency, keeping people confused. And so in many respects, if you look at the recent surfacing and now in mainstream media of the gain of function and the bioweapons, in my opinion, that serves two functions, one of which is to reinforce the supremacy of the virology as the tool of domination narrative. And then that nature of defense bioweapon labs also makes people fearful, because knowing that, what are we supposed to do about those things? There's nothing that can be done if that is what you feel like is the main threat, is a faraway Defense Department bioweapons lab. So I think it's important to look and see who's putting out what narratives, and are they talking about nanotechnology and frequencies. The virology element of this, we have to understand that in this global prison planet that they're building, biosurveillance and a woman who's actually enforced and has surfaced a lot about nanotech for months, and I wasn't really in a space yet to really surface it in the way that it was really proper, but now it is. now I have the mental bandwidth to pull this out. I spent a lot of time looking through this handbook of biosurveillance, which was published in 2005, right? So these are the couple years leading up to the last global economic crash. And if you understand that the prison planet is going to be controlled. The human beings of, if we're aiming for one world government driven by the Sustainable Development Goals, a central part of this is going to be perpetual pandemics, and that the World Bank has this program set up about One Health. And we have to understand that the current health scenario as well as the climate scenario intersect. There's like a Venn diagram, and the cross piece is that this One Health, that if people are engaged in nature, that we are only harming nature. This is regular people. This is not Exxon or IBM or any of these things, but regular folks should stay out of nature because we are only harming nature, and that nature should be isolated from people because it might contain sources of contagion that would be harmful to communities. And so everyone must be kept apart. And in that keeping apart, it allows them to more accurately build their planetary computer, which is based on biosensors and simulation. And so the narratives around health and the narratives around climate crisis are central. And in that, the biosurveillance scenario that is tied, really very much into various governments, state security apparatuses at this point, will allow for immense data collection of every living thing on the earth and the creation of a digitally twinned world. And so that is where this is headed. If you follow the road of virology, that's where the road goes. And then that is the tool of control that will be executed to manage you. So the other piece, and this is sort of a class issue, is that who gets to decide about virology, right? Who gets to decide the truth? Well, you have to be an expert and you have to have the tool, right? And the tool of choice in virology is electron microscope, which I guess if you got a cheap one, you can get it for maybe $50,000 or $60,000. But of course, that would never be accepted as like reputable scientific evidence. So really, you would probably need one that was like a tens of millions of dollar electron microscope to be the arbiter of truth in the space of virology. And then, to have access to that equipment, surely you have to be credentialed within the system of allopathic medicine and scientific research and development, which is largely funded by compromised philanthropic interests and also the Defense Department. So in order to even access the tool that would allow you to share your truths as you see it in looking at the world through essentially like a digital simulation, you have to have run the gauntlet of being credentialed within the system of domination. And, with all that means in terms of your social status, your debt status, your accreditation to do your work and to continue in your career. And so that's very controlling. And it's also very classist because to run that gauntlet, it takes a lot of money. Even this is an image that I pulled from Yale about what you would need to do to be credentialed to use their electron microscopy labs. And, you would need, like $1,000 just to get up to speed to prove that you could use the tool. So this isn't something that the average person then could come in and say, wait a minute, I'm questioning your methodology, because generally, unless you have been credentialed into the space, if you adopt biosurveillance and virology as the tool of domination, you're never going to get there. So I would say at this point, rather than looking at the bioweapons labs, that we should be looking more closely at another story which surfaced and then sort of got pulled back down, which is Charles Lieber. Now, Charles Lieber has been a professor at Harvard for decades, and his specialty is looking at nanoelectronics and biotechnologies, and has done a lot of work in China, and that's sort of what got him in hot water legally, was this idea that he was taking money from the Chinese government that was not allowed, right? And so he was sort of brought up into the public sphere and saying that, look, he has done this terrible thing. And now he has evidently a cancer diagnosis, which is, to me, it's not clear whether that means that he's now going to be working backstage as that progresses. But what he's developed are at this nano scale, transistors, nanocomputing, and nanowires. And some of these nanowires, you can see this is at the bottom. This is an image from actually 2010, right? So over a decade ago, where they're talking about the use of graphene and nanowire transistors in electronics, nanoelectronics, which I'm going to go on to show that the nanoelectronics are not simply something that's going to sit in a a small pack that you use, but will become integral in the biocomputing Internet of Bodies interface. So to me, this is the area that bears examination, is Lieber and nanotechnology and nanowires in his relationship to MITRE. And MITRE is a company that a nonprofit that I'm going to go into in much more detail tomorrow. So we actually did find some people who had access to an electron microscope who were willing to do work and examine contents of these various medical interventions and medical supplies and see what they found. And the findings of this, again, these are people who are experts in Spain. They go by La Quinta Columna, the fifth column, to talk about findings of what appears to be graphene oxide in these various medical processes, I will say, since we are on YouTube. And it's really important because this was a person who actually commandeered the tools and was willing to say what they found, which is how you do real science. And so I will emphasize that once you start looking into graphene and graphene oxide, you will realize that it's being framed as the wonder material of the universe, and that it exists far beyond simply medical products, but is in almost every aspect of our environment. And so if we understand what's coming in the context of terrain theory, that this isn't simply something that people are potentially choosing to avail themselves of products that include this. This is something that is being surreptitiously embedded in almost every element of the built environment, in the living environment that we're existing in, or that is the plan if we don't start to interrogate it. So it's important to look up the work of La Quinta Columna. It's in Spanish, but there's also a website that I have linked to that does English translations. And so again, do your homework and look into this, because I feel like this, at least my position at the moment, as it's evolving, is this is a key tenet of what's happening. So again, my questions in the who controls the narrative space, right? We've got the mainstream narrative, and we have the alt media narrative, and then we have, I don't know, the alt media fringe narrative. But we know that a lot of people have been looking at Rainer Fulmich's interviews and him building this legal case in Germany around sort of, human rights, right, around what's happened this past year. And I think it's really important to point out that La Quinta Columna, because they felt the same way, that this was important work that was being consolidated, all of this information on what was happening, sent their research on June 2nd of 2021. So at this point, this is 6 weeks in. This is 6 weeks worth of work. And you would think that if someone was really looking at important unfolding events, that this would become a priority, right? To get this message out, or to at least interrogate it and start sounding the alarm, and having all of the other people who are paying attention to the other interviews that are going on here to start doing their own investigations into what is happening. As I see it, that isn't really what has happened over the past 6 weeks. And instead, there was a limited distribution of this information that was coming largely through Dr. Jane Ruby. And again, I think it's great that people are putting information out, but this was a tweet today, and this is just a random person that I saw, but this person is saying, why is it always the same two people talking about this? And I'll just reassert this. This is someone I don't even know, okay? Why is it always the same two people talking about this stuff? And I would say, that's a good point. Why is it always the same two people? Why is, if this information went out on June 2nd, is the whole space of people who are contesting this broader narrative digging into this work, right? Why is this not being surfaced in a bigger way? And, these two people, the thing is that they represent a pretty partisan perspective. And again, we know that what's going on is not partisan at all. It's a world struggle to preserve natural life. But the fact that if certain stories were gatekept to certain communities, I think you have to wonder, why is that? Why is that happening? And what is the motivation to channel stories in certain ways? Because I know that and now it is becoming, I think I've gotten 2 links in the past day that now people are actually talking about it in a broader way, but this is 6 weeks in. And I think that's telling that this information would have been sat on and directed in a narrow way for those 6 weeks. So I would encourage people to keep that in mind as you're consuming media and understanding this. In terms of the importance of graphene, This is a professor, chemistry professor, Joe Schwartz from McGill. And on the graphene topic, it's really important. It's really central. In fact, this was a video he did in April after the Canadian Health Department pulled face coverings that were related that contained graphene off. They had been being distributed in schools to children. And essentially the point of this video was, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is the most unique, amazing material in the whole world. And everybody needs to be paying attention to this. It's really super important. And in fact, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie The Graduate, but there's a really important scene in that film where Dustin Hoffman gets taken aside at this cocktail party, and the corporate husband sort of says, Benjamin, the future, I'm just going to give you one word for the future. The future is plastics. Okay, that was the movie in the 60s. The future is plastics. Well, now, if you consider terrain theory and you consider the devastation that has been wrought by plastics in the world, microplastics, cancers, the production, the waste, the degradation, the water pollution, that's pretty significant, right? So this gentleman, who's a professor of chemistry, who's part of their innovation division at McGill, is saying, wait, graphene. If you made this movie today, instead of plastics, you would say graphene. And so what I'm saying is, yes, we must think of graphene and in its role, in its planned role in what is coming in terrain theory as the same as plastics. And perhaps I would assert maybe even more devastating. So this is another patent that I found. Someone had shared it with me, I think a while back, and I was resurfacing. If we understand the nanotech and frequency, the idea of getting nanotech within the body, self-assembling nano mechanical systems and controlling them through frequencies, because a lot of that is being done through Tesla coils and other things. This is a patent from 2001 where they're actually talking about remote magnetic manipulation of nervous systems. This is a guy, Hendrikus Loos. He's since passed, I think, but based out of Laguna Beach, California, and he was doing work under contract to the Defense Department and to Health and Human Services. And actually he was involved in work around the cost of HIV and also aerosolization. So I think all of us are still trying to figure out in some ways, like, what explains people's inability to engage in critical thinking around what's happening. And I think we have to sort of imagine what's going on with frequency weapons at this point, because even in 2001, they were talking about controlling the nervous system through magnetic frequencies from a distance and framing this as something you would use in a standoff situation. But we have to know that graphene oxide, graphene itself is not magnetic, it's in and of itself, but it can be reconfigured and layered and twisted in a way to increase magnetism along with electronic conductivity. And so I think we need to look at this larger picture within the context of remote neurological manipulation, not just of people, but this is from the same patent. It was talking about the same functioning of magnetic resonance in the human body applied to other mammals, and that they were looking at using it for animal control systems, right? And so I would just indicate that it might be worth a revisit to understand why in the world are we starting to see injections of all sorts of zoo animals at this point. What is going on with the animals? Because again, we know that within the larger Internet of Bodies prison planet, that looking at 5G and Internet of Things and livestock management and wildlife population management is very similar. And so understanding it not simply as like a wearable collar, but now potentially as a magnetic nanoparticle or nanoelectronic is something that I think it's really important that we keep in mind. So essentially, I will just sort of put forward, and this is something that my friend who has done deep research in this space their thinking at this point is that what is going on is that the Internet of Bodies, the Internet of bio-nano things is very much about creating ubiquitous sensing environment that integrate our bodies into electronic systems. And graphene is essential. Graphene nanomaterials are going to be a building block for that. And then the larger question is, how do the researchers who are advancing this program intend to ensure that the materials that are being introduced are biocompatible? Because I think that the goal is not actually mass death, but is more likely because what they want is data analytics, and they want the metaverse built, and they've built these social impact investing schemes around all of this. That is not mass death immediately. It is to create chronic illness and to create an environment that will house the biosensors that allow them to acquire their data. And to do that, it's like a parasite. They need to not actually immediately kill the host. They can weaken the host, but they can't kill the host. And so the question now is, with the graphene tied to biosensors, tied to nanoelectronics, is what dosing can they do to not kill off the host? And in a lot of the research that's being done around cell toxicity and graphene, a lot of it depends on dosing and other environmental factors. And so I think it might be useful to consider what is happening now within that broader context is a grand experiment to across various geographies, various different, groups with, genetic structures, and to see how they can work this system with dosing that doesn't kill the host. So again, I talked about the cyborgs. They also talk about them as centaurs, this idea that there's going to be a spectrum of humans turning into computers and computers turning into robots, humans turning into robots, robots turning into humans, and in the spectrum between. And they call that sort of human-computer interface and centaurs. It's not surprising that they might start with non-humans because humans are pretty complex. And so MIT Media Lab has been doing work with plants. And I remember seeing a discussion of this in an RFP for the Internet of Battlefield Things. It was a defense contracting contract that was let. And in the packet, the proposal packet, they actually talked about having roses turned into transmitters, this was about 3 years ago that I saw this. So this technology has advanced. Here's an image from 2019 where they're talking about cyborg botany and turning plants into electronic devices. Well, I would say that the powers that be that imagine themselves as gods over the universe are looking to turn all life into electronic devices, including human beings. They'll start with the plants, and then they'll gradually work their way up into more complex life forces. And that within this, on my Twitter feed, I have an image that's a video by MIT of the cyborg botany. They're actually turning the plants into sensors, into screens, so you can interact with the plant, that the plant can actually sense motion. They had an image where the plant sensed a cat running by out the door, and the woman got a notification on her computer screen that said cat running. So she would know to go bring her cat back into the apartment. And so they're actually turning living things into elements of the panopticon, right? And that next phase is, I think, human life. But the antenna elements are also connected. They frame it as wires. This is not us sticking a wire up into a stem. It's actually creating nanoelectronics that can self-assemble into the plant as an antenna, and graphene is a part of that. This was just shared with me today. It's from Innovation Toronto, looking at, this is from the Graphene Flagship Project, which is central in all this in the EU. Out of the University of Trieste, they're talking about graphene dispersed in the atmosphere could produce some harm. Okay, so we're saying graphene in everything. I just want to be very clear, folks who are only thinking about this in a medical construct, that if you avoid engaging with this medically, that you're going to be safe. I would assert that based on the framing of this, the phrasing here, dispersing of graphene in the atmosphere, that none of us are safe, that this is nothing that anyone is going to be able to fully escape from. And that's why it has to be dealt with in a head-on manner. They talk about trying to figure out how to use enzymes in the human body to address the potential toxicity of the graphene. But even in and of itself, it says here that once graphene is digested by enzymes, it could produce harmful derivatives. And this is something that they're in the process of studying now. Okay, so this is all in the mix here. And I'm almost done, Jason, then we'll stop for questions if that works.
Yep.
I would just like to assert that we know that there are really robust AI programs around tracking side effects over these medical interventions that are happening. And I would assert that if you understand what is happening, not simply as, if you understand this as an experiment, right? I mean, we've understood it's all happening in a state of exception because it's an experiment. It's a grand experiment. It's actually about launching the Internet of Bodies. And I believe about looking at integrating graphene into our biological systems in a way that they can make work. And they understand there's probably a range of dosing that is involved, and that a lot of the AI tracking could conceivably be more aligned with that, is figuring out how to create graphene that is biocompatible. And then I think this is sort of my end, but I will say, I'm going to go into cybernetics a bit down the line. Again, I've talked about how impact investing and pathways and putting people through their paces with biosensors feeds the data to feed sort of the hive mind consciousness towards the singularity. This is about more than just creating us, turning us into humanized robots, but is actually about harvesting our life force into unlocking the key of life, really, and to allowing those who can control this experiment they think that they will be in a place then, once they have this key of what life is, that they can actually acquire it, and that they can become God, that they can replace God. And so part of this is this idea in longevity is replacing our material selves with nanoelectronics to turn us into electrical systems that are outside of bodies. And that for 20 years, they have been working with MIT, among others, on mind uploads and looking at human life as just a data fabrication zone for a substrate independent mind, a mind that exists outside of a material body. And what they most need to accomplish this at this point is they're developing the tech, they're refining the tech. And again, there are questions onto like how much of this is just hot air that they're blowing smoke, or how much of it is real. But what they most want is an extensive library of neurons, of neural function and morphology to match their tech and to get it to work. And so if we understand the coding, the tracking, the graphene, the biosensors, the systematizing of life into this larger library system, that it is about building up the library, that the AI tracking tied to the medical interventions here are about probably setting up the infrastructure towards these libraries. This is an infographic, and I will share the slide deck afterwards. But when I was trying to get my head around how all of this works, like what does this look like? I believe that the end goal is what Joseph and others have called full spectrum dominance. It's a military term, but actually dominating life from the microbiome all the way up to the atmosphere and the satellites and the cosmos. To merge humans and computers, that this is all happening in a military construct, that it's actually forced evolution in a military environment, that they are working to make consciousness mechanical, and then to use our lives to actually power the computer that they're building. And that potentially this forced evolution into a consciousness that exists outside of a biological substrate, I guess they would call it, to turn us into Sims, is that it could be a platform for extra planetary travel, right? However they imagine that your consciousness would be uploaded and then more portable in that format. And that cybernetics is central, the engineering, the behavior to get that digital twin model with AI. That I've talked about the perpetual pandemic and the World Bank as being central to the program of getting the data harvest and keeping the social control systems. That this narrative that we're being fed is to keep everyone in fear and to keep people divided amongst each other and to isolate people as they get the data they want. That the infrastructure has been going in regarding the sensor networks for the spatial web, which is 5 and 6G, and on, I think they have multiple other Gs planned, the bio-nanotech, and that your biometric identity will link you to this software. That virology is the invisible enemy. It obscures the nano weapons, the neurotech that we're talking about. That digital twinning is central to creating this separate consciousness, and that this is going to be hung on electronic health records. and linked to cell atlases and other biocomputing and bioinformatics and genomic research, and that the impact investing is essentially a way of keeping people enslaved and dependence on the state, and to track it all on a ledger system. And that the end product here is the centaur. And that I think in many respects, what we're looking at is the development of a green energy system, of a renewable energy system through piezoelectric energy harvest, that it will be human life that is coming. So yeah, and this is almost my last one. This is an image, these are two images, the quality is not great, but from a friend and I ended up in the portico outside of the old Parkland debate room, which is really pretty much deep state Dallas. And I took these pictures on Martin Luther King Day, January 2020, having no idea what was coming. And it's very important to note here that at the top level, and these paintings were put in later, is Steve Jobs with the apple and up on the film there, and then the DNA. And so I think, and then many of these other images were about the Cold War, which I think later is actually was a setup for the weaponization of the environment for this electromagnetic frequency weapons. So this idea, I think, of transhumanism is coming, and this is coming through various interventions, but including communities of faith. And this is a person who ended up engaging with me some this past week. His name is Lincoln Cannon. And I will in no way represent this as the norm of the faith practice of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but he is the founder of the Mormon Transhumanism group. And once you look at the church's extensive investments in tech and biotech, I have grave concerns. He's based in Orem, Utah, which is in the whole test bed of a lot of the digital identity, bioinformatics, biocomputing, impact investing space of where this is all going. And I'm gonna just run this as a very short clip of Lincoln speaking to the Mormon Transhumanist Association about resurrection, and in the context of, I believe the creation, what he's actually talking about is the creation of digital twins.
And the copies could go on to have individuating experiences and separate identities, and maybe you're already a copy of God that individuated. So it's not clear that there's anything inherently bad about the possibility of copies, but it's also clear that that could be abused. And so maybe there should be laws. Maybe there are laws among the gods about how to manage the preservation of identity. And that reminds me of things that Brigham Young talked about on a regular basis. He actually said that eternal life is the power to maintain your identity. And so maybe he was on to something.
Okay. Sorry. So I just want to restate that. He said that the, it is the power to control your identity, even past possibly the end of your physical body. And so I think I would encourage people, I have this clip on my YouTube channel, the full 15-minute talk, it's not very long. He goes into in great detail about this idea of resurrection through family history and to resurrect the dead, essentially as data, talking about quantum archaeology and sort of a quantum archaeological historian that will put you back together and raise you from the dead. And so in many respects, I think what's happening there is he's talking about blockchain. He's talking about the permanent ledger that will record everything about you to recreate you as the digital twin in perpetuity, this substrate independent mind. So, okay, so I'll just take a pause, and do we want to see if there's questions?
Yeah, I've been collecting them.
Okay.
And the first one is, does your current thinking taking nano and the military into account reshape your view of social impact investing, its scope, importance, relation to other issues, agendas?
Well, I think lately, and this has been, Sophia Smallstorm has really influenced me a lot in terms of understanding piezoelectric energy harvest and actually computing within biological systems, that this idea of sustainability and sustainable energy, because I've noticed, like, even when I was doing my ed tech work, it was really interesting to me that many of the entities in that space were big oil, right? And John Arnold is very much in impact investing space, Enron. And why would that be, right? And we know that, the Saudi sovereign wealth fund is sort of starting to divest and put their oil money into AI and robotics. And people have asked, how are they going to run the metaverse? How are they running the spatial web? And, I don't have the proof that that's exactly how they're going to do it, but I think nanotechnology is really central in the idea of smart environments. I have some images of smart tiles in India where they talk about walking, like every aspect of your physical engagement, and I think potentially even emotional engagement, because they're talking about calcification of the pineal gland and piezoelectric energy here, because increasingly, even in social media, I'm seeing shocking ads, pop up in front of me. And I'm like, are you trying to shock me? Is there some kind of jolt of energy that they're getting out of the system? And the idea of how do they capture that? They've been very clear that the plan is to capture that for your wearable technology. But I think increasingly our interactions with our environment will lead to data capture that will be used to fuel the metaverse, and that this will all be framed as sustainability. So I think all of the impact investing is, again, reframed as sustainability. So I don't think it really changes it substantially, but I do believe the more you look at it, that in the matrix, that we are weirdly these batteries, that the intention is both our mental processes, our emotional lives, and our physical lives will be harnessed to run the system. And so I think increasingly too, and this is something that Sophia has shared with me, is that if you picture people on pathways, that you have to complete certain behaviors in order to access credits or tokens or rights or privileges, that the physical or emotional process that you have to go to, if it's tied with energy harvest, that literally you could be powering the universe. And one of the examples that she gave was, imagine someone who has an alcohol abuse problem and is panhandling, right? In the past, people might just give somebody a $20 bill or what have you and move on. And in a digital currency space, that is no longer going to be the option. And so what if, in order to earn the credit, the person would have to go perform a fitness behavior, right? Like perform fitness behavior to get enough money to eat, or to go into the drugstore and figure out some way to address their, temporarily address their addiction problem, and it's none of it's healthy. But I think increasingly, like if you send someone, you say, go do this physical activity and that it powers the metaverse. I've even actually raised this, and I want to talk about this more at some point, but these blockchain media platforms in a future where they're of digital script, of digital currency, what is to say that at some point they're not going to have you, when no one has any money left, do 50 jumping jacks to tip out your favorite content provider, right? That's how I see these things integrating. So perform right behaviors as is decided by the billionaire class, essentially. And that's what impact investing is doing. But then with not just the wearable technology, the smart shirts, the smart shoes, the smart housing, but literally the biosensors, they're literally looking to use these impact investing to learn you from the inside out and the outside in.
Okay, and then another thing, do you feel comfortable with stopping your screen share while you do the Q&A? That way people could see you, and then you could jump back into it. Yeah, just for aesthetic.
Sorry. Is that good now?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Let me change the. Okay, sorry, just something. There we go. Okay, so the next question is, well, I think this is a rhetorical question, so I'll just read it and then I'll go to the next question. Will the world ever know that virology is a fraud? So that's just kind of a rhetorical question. What is the difference between not mass death and not mass death immediately? How many people would they need for experiments?
I mean, at this point, it's sort of conjecture. I mean, most of my positioning is I would, based on seeing the work that they're doing around graphene in the world, if they just wanted to clear house, like I feel like that would be enormous upheaval and it would be really messy, right? Like it would create like an impossibly terrible world. So unless the people, you know, we're all just living on islands or the resorts, which might be, I don't know that they're looking for a cataclysm. If so, I don't think they would be investing all of this research into trying to figure out how to turn us into soft robots. I don't think they would be setting up the whole impact investing space. And so I would just caution that the people who are asserting exclusively mass die-off, I don't think that's helpful. And I think in some ways, if this is an energetic engagement, it keeps people in a space of fearfulness, and what it's doing is activating negative energy to keep people from you know, to put people in a nihilistic position is my thought. So I don't know how many. I mean, clearly reproductive control is a part of it, and that could be a huge element of how they manage the dosing of this. And that, like, if you look at, you know, Brave New World and, you know, the various classes of beings, you know, having some people to be the batteries and some people to be the, you know, managerial class of this, like, they're still going to need some people around. So I think it's probably far more profitable for big pharma and digital therapeutics to have a lot of chronically ill people or people who have are experiencing mental trauma from this, because then they're going to be selling their product, because this is also a capitalist thing. I mean, it's weird. It's global capital through impact investing and through sales of, you know, fixes for the environmental toxins they're selling that will never fix you, that is then generating the data collection to lead to the singularity. And, you know, I don't have a good beat on exactly if they're ever going to get to the singularity or what that time frame is.
Okay. And why do you think Rainer Fulmich, is it Fulmich? Am I saying that correctly? Why do you think Rainer Fulmich sat on the graphene information?
I'm just surfacing facts, guys. But I think it's important that those facts be surfaced, because I think this is a crucial piece of the puzzle. And so I think if we understand that we're in an information war, how information is managed is key. I mean, and how information is managed is key. And so I would just ask people to do their own thinking and consume media with discernment. Patterns of behavior, right? You know, if all of a sudden all the people who, you know, I have seen a couple of more prominent people, like I've gotten links. And to be honest, I don't spend tons of time listening to other people's stuff. I've got my own research I'm doing. And so it may be being surfaced in other places. And I've gotten links to other spaces in the last 2 days that is surfacing it. So that is a good thing. But yeah, just consume your media with discernment. You guys can ask him. Why wasn't somebody ask him? That'd be great. Maybe he has a good answer.
Yeah, that's my thing, is why, you know, the conversation ends up being kind of about like creating a conflict when it's just like, hey, yeah, why isn't this being discussed? And the question that you keep asking, Alison, whether it's around blockchain or these other things, is just, are these massive elements that are just being completely ignored within certain spaces. And it's not a matter of trying to create some sort of conflict between this side versus that side. It's just, do you think this information is valuable? And if so, you know, we should be asking more questions of folks. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't need to go into this whole like creating personality conflict nonsense. And anyways, that's just my take.
I'm not trying to, but at the same time, it's important, because it's an information war, to actually surface primary source documentation. If Quinta Columna sent him in good faith that information on June 2nd, where is it, right? Like where is it? And yeah, I think that's a really important thing, because if people are putting their faith in certain outlets, then there needs to be some elaboration on if it was decided that this was not important, then what was that reasoning, and does it change? But if you're acting in sort of this global space and people are putting their faith in you, the way in which you're curating content matters.
Yeah,
people should have access to know what the rationale is.
Yeah, for sure. So what happens with the whole supposed depopulation agenda if injection's not designed to kill plus transhumanism?
Well, I mean, I think I've sort of covered that. I mean,
Okay.
I don't think what they're after is immediate global upheaval, or if not, they wouldn't have been building all of these other apparatuses. I think, and I will go into this later, but I think the end game, as I understand it now, and this is not the end game as I saw it even a couple months ago, right? So we're continuing to evolve, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers. I'm just presenting how I think about things and seeing how other people, if it is helpful to them, is that once you understand what seems to be that they are revisiting Darwinian evolution, and I'll go into that a little bit later, and understanding life as a designed system, that a system of intelligent design that is based on, and this is something Joseph's been spending some time teaching me about communication theory, information theory, that the universe is built on information and receivers and transmitters of information, including DNA, including life. What they're trying to do is to crack that code. And I don't honestly think they'll be able to crack that code, but they imagine themselves being able to crack that code. And for code breaking, you need massive amounts of data and quantum computing. And so if what they most want is to somehow get the beautiful diversity of life, spiritual life, physical life, emotional life, harnessed into this crazy project that they have, killing off a bunch of people isn't actually going to accomplish that, if that is the goal. And for me at this point, I think that is the goal, is code breaking it. So they want to incapacitate that life to make it less able to rebel in a physical way. But I don't think they want to eliminate it, not until they can get the consciousness substrate uploaded, because that is their, data is the new oil, data is the prize. They want that. They don't want to just erase all the data. They want to control it, but they don't want to, I don't think that they want to, it would be like throwing away a valuable resource.
So here's this person put 3 questions into the one. How many people do they need to experiment with to make the perfect cyborgs? How many years will it take to transform a human being? How fast can they make a man to a cyborg? So I think they're all kind of related to how long you think all this will it'll take to play out.
Well, I mean, all of this is dual use, right? And so they have very sophisticated technologies that they're already using, prosthetics, neural prosthetics, physical prosthetics, within the context of people who are dealing with physical, or mental issues in their lives. A lot of these are veterans. A lot of this overlaps with disability rights community, and so they pick elements. And so again, is someone with a pacemaker a cyborg? I mean, I guess in some respects, I guess if it's connected to the cloud. So it's a continuum, I would say. Like, that's how they talk about it, is a continuum, the centaur. And I can't say for sure like how long or if they'll actually be able to accomplish it all. But what I'm trying to do is to show their lines of investigation, because I think there are many elements of scientific research that are related to nanoelectronics and AI and robotics and soft robotics and neural prosthetics that aren't entering the health conversation yet. They're not being perceived of as part of this health conversation of the biosecurity state. And I would say that they very much are. And I would encourage more people to really build off this idea of the Internet of Bodies, not simply where I was maybe 4 months ago, is like wearables, but within the biosensor and the nanoelectronic space. Because at this point, I mean, I think actually the defense, like, they experiment on military, on people in the military first. And so I know that there are implants in soldiers, super soldier implants that are already, taking place. And again, this is dual use. So when will it show up in the domestic population? And if it shows up, will it be consensual? Because as I'll mention later, but I've been in touch with people who are victims of sort of cyber torture, and these sensor networks, I believe, are already being in place in a non-consensual environment. Are there any more? Are we still here?
Sorry, I
Okay.
had muted my mic because I had to cough, and then I was like, okay, hold on. Okay, so I'm going to do 4 more here, and then we'll continue on. So,
Okay.
how far is how far is transhumanism connected to space travel? Also, a lot of military action out there lately. Those are in parentheses,
Yeah.
meaning to transform biological life to digital / crystalline form of life.
Well, I'll go into it a little bit later, but I mean, I think that's where like Google Alphabet is coming in, and all of the smart sensing and their role in the biosurveillance state is they talk about the selfish ledger. You know, I don't know for sure that they could upload a consciousness, right? Like I'm not to that place because I do feel very strongly that we're in a place of spirit here, and that what they think they're capturing is not all what it actually is, like the beingness, the being part of human. They think they've captured something, but it's not the thing that they think they're getting. But I do feel like, you know, they want to sort of put us in a data bank for later, right? That it's, if you can save us as some crystalline structure and access us, that is a resource, that is a natural resource. And I think increasingly when we look at social impact investing in human capital, is that really they see us as a mineable commodity, right? And we're already seeing this in genomic sequencing and putting all of that on blockchain, as they see that there's a value in that data analytics. And imagine if they can put, you know, all of your beingness on that. And, you know, they're in the process of creating readable and writable DNA, you know, that is artificial. That's out of University of Washington. You know, how much of that artificial DNA would it take to put a replica, like a digital replica? Because I think whatever they're getting is your digital twin. It's not actually you. It's not the essence of you. So yeah, I don't have a specific time frame. I mean, to me, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but a key person in cybernetic space was Licklider, and he, in 1963, he wrote a memo to the Intergalactic Network about, it was like a few years before he helped establish the ARPANET. He was he did acoustics and psychology, and he wrote this to the Intergalactic Network. So I think even back then, they were imagining consciousness outside of the material world and in a spatial intergalactic context. But yeah, I don't know the specifics.
Okay, so concern for those that have been subject to medical apartheid and other traps of the broken systems for years and adapted, learn to live within these cages. We'll see. I'm sorry, that was not a question. That was a statement. Anyways, they were just saying that they will see this as a positive. Let me go on to the next one. It seems like the social engineers have big plans for blockchain. What are the features of this tech which will make it so uniquely suited for their purposes? And how do these features make it suited for these purposes?
Well, the idea of blockchain is it's a permanent ledger, and it's an interoperable data ledger. So when in a machine learning environment, so a lot of what's coming with the impact investing space is that from the back end, they're going to feed the data collected, the impact data, into something called Ocean Protocol, and this includes Singularity Net, to try to trigger this AI. But data that is uncorrelated to anything, it's just like, you know, puzzle pieces that are thrown out on a table. They're not particularly useful, but when they're actually put together to make the picture, then they become more useful. And so the element of blockchain is that it is, it's interoperable, and it's has more granular depth, is the interrelatability of the different elements, right? Like your health data connected to your education data, connected to your behavioral data. All of these helps the system learn you and predictably profile you in a way that I think will help with the digital twinning and help it start to, the system, like the quantum computing AI system, understand what it is like to be a human being, or be a tree, or be a, you know, a fish, or wherever they're putting the sensor networks attached to that. So it's the interoperability. And then I would say from the impact investing space, it's very closely linked to programmable money, right? And it's not even money, it's like script, that your ability to interface with smart environments is tracked on blockchain. And so beyond like a cash monetary system, your rights and privileges become tokens on blockchain, and they can be programmed. And so your ability to function in the physical world, the blockchain piece gets built into geofencing and gamification, right? The leveling up. Do you have the token that will allow you to do this particular task you're attempting to do? Does your biosensor say that you're allowed to do this thing, that your health status is such that you can leave your house, or that your health status is such that you can go to the grocery store? And so all of that needs to be tracked on the ledger system. The other piece is that they've been really far advanced in developing electronic health records on blockchain. And that was actually the pioneer, and that was the state of Delaware, right? So that's where Biden is from. And so if we understand single payer, what Zeke Emanuel has done, whose family is very deeply invested in impact investing and tech, and Zeke is now based at Penn, which is sort of the hotbed of all of this, that your electronic health record in your single payer system, that's the carrot that will then hook you into the Borg. And this Borg is beyond just, tracking your cell therapies or tracking your medical interventions or tracking your good health behaviors or your bad health behaviors. But increasingly, there's a person named Melanie Swan who has done a really deep dive into transhumanism and blockchain brains. So she imagines that this hive mind consciousness, that we will all be engaged in smart contract negotiations, even with one another and machines. And so I think in some respects, this idea of rooms, like digital rooms on social media, is a precursor to a hive mind blockchain brain, right? Like you'll have a token to access into a room where you do collaboration around problems, issues, what have you. Some of those entities in that space will be machine consciousness, some of them will be human consciousness, and that there will be outputs tracked on the blockchain in terms of your relative worth to the conversation, and that payment will track you. I'll talk about this a little bit later, but that your blockchain wallet almost becomes your portal that attaches your digital twin you to your material worldview. And it's the ledger system that tracks everything across your real world into the metaverse. And ultimately, blockchain was established to track digital assets online. It was to allow this new version of digital capitalism to grow. So.
Okay, so we'll just do one more, and then I'll have you continue on with your presentation. Is it fair to say that if we run around in fear, we are doing their work?
Well, I would say that we're all human still. And it's a lot, right? Like dealing with this stuff is a lot. And I'm not here to lecture anybody about how they should feel about these things. As I've said at the beginning, I don't come at this from a place of nihilism, because I think if you imagine, they know there's something bigger out there. If they have probably the resources to control all of the material stuff of the world. They have the military power, they have the economic power. It's so concentrated right now that in the material realm, they have the distinct advantage. And yet they need to shoot us up with biosensors, because even that isn't enough. And so we're in this space knowing that we're powerful. It's like John Trudell said, we're each the raindrop, and together we can become the storm if we have clarity about that. And so, I know my strategies are not everybody's preferred strategies. I think once I realized that a central piece of this was frequency weapons and geoengineering, the idea of eluding the system and setting up something outside became pretty clear that was not going to be possible, at least how I saw it. And yet I think the most revolutionary thing one can do is try to create beauty and joy with what resources that you have, right? Because that is the most defiant thing, is to create, and to create from a place of beauty, knowing that some days are gonna suck. Some days you're gonna just throw your hands up and be done with everything, and that is perfectly human. But I don't think we can live in that space, because I think they want us to think that we don't have agency, and we do have agency, especially I think when we can build it with other people. And, you know, I've experienced that online very much. You know, we have, I think, a really beautiful, like, eclectic, horizontal, decentralized group of folks all over the world now who are sharing their gifts, and we're making beautiful things. And then, you know, that for me to be able to take this trip to upstate New York and actually build things with people in person, and to experience waterfalls and swamps and do sort of spiritual engagements towards a place of healing, was really powerful for me. So I would say, yeah, fear is okay. Fear is a normal reaction. Staying in fear is probably not helpful. And then how you find your agency in this is, what are your gifts and who are your people, and find those and try to cultivate that where you can, knowing that, like, you're not going to be able to do it every day. Like, you're not going to be able to do that all the time, but you could, you can focus on those things, because that is what they hate most, is that they can't keep their thumb on that part of you, on the spiritual part of you, on the part that makes art and makes music and hugs children and puts your feet in the water. They can't get all of that yet. And so we should live in that place. And so if what brings you beauty is gardening, if what brings you beauty is setting up a community outside of a smart city environment and doing mutual aid and being collaborative, do that as long as you can. Not because you think you're escaping the thing, but that you're living in defiance of it.
Okay, so just so if those of you are watching, feel free to keep adding your questions, because I am monitoring the chat on YouTube. I'm also trying to check out the Facebook as well. I haven't seen questions there, which is good because it makes it easier for me. So we'll take another break here in a little bit, and I'll keep collecting the questions. And so, yeah, carry on.
All right, let me, wait a minute, desktop, no, Google Chrome share, okay, so digital twins. Okay, so this is where I'm starting my talk, and I will just say, I'm gonna, oh shoot, I can't do it, because all right, well, I will just do it a little bit. So when I started my Utica talk, I always bring my little ladies along, and I made a special one for New York, and I left it there with my friends who go hiking around Onondaga Lake, and I've given them away. I've given some away now. I'm down to 2, but I'm gonna make some more for future visits. But again, we're coming at this from a place of love, and this was sort of my framing. I always sort of frame it that we're doing it for the children, and then this is my nature anti-panopticon, breaking Michael Bloomberg's panopticon with the eye of the natural world, that we're doing this for all of the other beings. And I will just share that someone had sent me a while back this beautiful little terrarium with a bee on it. So we're doing it for the bees and the lightning bugs. So these things are all here with me in this space. And I started off the talk with, it's getting a little worse for wear. I had to glue it back on. It was a paper towel that was delaminating, but this is sort of my token that I start my talks off with. Children's growth is guided by love. Thirst for power and control has no jurisdiction here. And so that is what I shared with everyone. And I will just say, in the frequency things, I have this friend who has done a lot of this work, works in energy. And so this little bowl that I have that I've used in the past, it actually has this is the beauty. And so I think, again, that is the answer, that even with their frequencies, we have our own frequencies and frequencies of the world. So this is my start. And I will say, I open just asking for people to come from a place of gratitude. I was actually in an area that was near where Robin Wall Kimmer, who's influenced me quite a bit. She's written a book called Braiding Sweetgrass, and she lives in the Syracuse area. She's a professor of biology at the SUNY Forestry School there, and her specialty is moss. And she talks about upstate New York as being Maple Nation, these beings, and that we as humans, that we need to be humble and listen to the other greater, older beings in the world. And this section, she was talking about tapping the maples and the time in which it takes to actually do that process and harvest the beautiful things of the earth, and to boil the sap down to something that they can use for their family, to add sweetness to their life throughout the year. And so I just asked for a minute, and maybe I'll ask you guys for a moment just to think of something in this time of difficulty that you're grateful for. And we'll just kind of hold space for that for a second. And I will just say I'm very grateful for my brother. I'm navigating some really hard family things right now. My father has dementia, and he's in a memory care place that is really hard and problematic. So I'm really grateful for family ties and trying to navigate this. So, you know, even though I say a lot of good things, it's not like we're not all going through hard stuff here. So I'm grateful for my brother, my brother Neil, and my sister-in-law Lisa. I'm also grateful, again, I want to reinforce that the information that I share and that, you know, from this talk and other talks is part of a collective effort. And so I'll share the slide deck later, but these are some people that have influenced my thinking around this topic, which include Celeste Solom, who had brought this to my attention last fall, Alana Freeland, who has a book coming out soon on transhumanism, and we were able to spend some time together in Tucson. The Fifth Column that I mentioned, Steffers at A Piece of Mindful. This piece on engineered nanoparticles is really important to look at. My friend Joseph, who is really an expert in AI and game design and blockchain, has helped me a lot. And he has a very interesting website. He's building a game around technocracy. Sophia Smallstorm, her influence on me around energy harvest and biocomputing is really important. And at the time, Amazing Polly, she had done a really interesting piece about the magnetosphere and neural manipulation. And so these are people, again, I owe a debt of gratitude to them for sharing this information and informing my approach. I started out the talk after sort of the gratitude acknowledgement, just with my overall framing, most of which I've already touched on, but that, and this seems far out. I mean, actually it was well received in this group. We probably had about 80 to 100 people in the room, and many of whom were older people, and they didn't really flinch away from this, but that this idea that there is a predator energy out there, as John Trudell calls it, and to me that feels the most unifying because it doesn't limit it to any small ism. It's a unified idea of a predator energy that is seeking to conquer the universe. And then it's about empire and domination. And I think if we come at it from that place, we understand this not as something that's originating out of any one national space or one particular organization or set of people. I think a lot of the people who are out there, the Gates and Schwabs and so on, are sort of the facade that hide a lot of the inner workings of this machine. This is an imperial machine of domination, and that it really is looking to usurp God as the creator at the top of this universe, cosmic universe, that there's someone at the top and they're looking to get the key to life and become the top coder and push God out of the way. And that the singularity, as I saw it initially, was like, oh, well, this is about the singularity. But in some respects, I think the singularity is to unlock that key, their attempt to unlock the key of life. And along the way, the creation of the singularity is to learn us inside and out, not just humans, but all living beings on the planet. And that is the function of the planetary computer. And that in this space, if you imagine our current existence as something that has, 3 dimensions, 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, this energetic space of what we can see and what is beyond our immediate ability to sense, is that they want to compress this thing into some small space in 2 dimensions to flatten it for this mind upload. And in doing so, they can control it more easily. And I've had someone on one of my comments made a very insightful thing that even the math in 2 dimensions is a lot easier to manage than the math in 3 dimensions. So they're looking to control it, to flatten it. And that this transition involves cybernetics, systems engineering, nanoelectronics, ubiquitous computing, frequencies and the weaponization of the atmosphere and the environment as a whole. So it really is about systematizing life and reducing any sort of natural serendipity, chaos of the living force into something that can be managed from a computer space. That it wants this human plus idea, the transhumanism, the centaurs is what it's aiming for. That graphene is a central element in this as the world's first two-dimensional material. Now it is not the only two-dimensional material. They are investigating other two-dimensional materials, but this is sort of has been lifted up since its discovery in 2004 as like this wonder material that is going to be everything, right? But just think plastics. That the digital twins that they'll use with the biosensors will seek to usurp our birth rate and break our real relationships. And so by pushing us into the metaverse through this blockchain wallet portal, that everything become at the one time aggregated for computer machine learning, but disaggregated in terms of our physical connection to one another and to the land. And that this is all unfolding through the narrative of a faux sustainability, in air quotes, and a faux social justice. Not that we don't care about the environment or that we don't care about people who have been harmed by these systems. We do very much, but that the solutions that are going to be offered that are data-driven and tied to digital surveillance and gamified pathways and that allow hedge fund betting on futures markets, that it's really about making us rats in a maze and controlling us through nudges, and that is not what we want. But in the end, that is not our destiny, and that love will win, like in the Madeleine L'Engle book, A Wrinkle in Time, but that we have to stand as keepers of life and that we have to state that we're not afraid. And I would say in that space of keepers of life and not being afraid, I've taken a lot of inspiration from both my friend Cliff, who always talks about like, there's going to be a great potluck in the Valley of Love after we walk through the zombie apocalypse, but it's already done. We just have to do the work. And that not being afraid, Tom Cowan speaks often of Briar Rose, the story of Sleeping Beauty, and that the knight's trying to slash through the hedges to get to the sleeping princess. But after a number of years, when people gave up, a new one came and he just said, I'm not afraid. And at that point, the hedges rolled back. And so, can I promise you that that's going to work? I can't. But I can also promise you that it's unlikely we're going to prevail against DARPA and Goldman Sachs if we stay in their game. So I think we need to find a way to navigate outside their game. Okay, so the Empire is trying to jam our signals. And if we look back at the Star Wars movies, like it's hard to understand that for many of us, at least in the US, that like we're actually the Empire, but we're citizens of Empire, and our innate intelligences that are integral to our heart function and our biological function and our sensing functions, that they're working to jam this. And so that is part of the distance, the 6 feet apart, is that people's heart energy to disrupt that. And I see this very much as a engagement of sacred versus profane. And just going back to the World Economic Forum, I think I spent a lot of time on this early. And at this point, I think like we pretty much know what they're about. And I think kind of like Bill Gates, we probably should be prepared not to move on in terms of understanding the complexity, because I think Schwab and Gates, they are sort of the cartoons that are meant to capture our attention and hold our gaze away from the other elements. But in this documentary of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is an 11.5-minute clip, which I highly recommend people watch if they haven't. I tried to show it to my family members early on, and who knows what kind of impression that left, but it pretty much says exactly what they're planning. And they do say that they're saying that this is a quote, the very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change. Our bodies will be so high tech, we won't really be able to distinguish between what's natural and what's artificial. You might ask yourself if we can get to be superhumans. And I would say, again, when I was speaking before about it being hard to understand where our bodies end and the environments begin, and being colonized by technology, either electronics technology and sometimes even biomaterials, like genetically engineered fungal colonies and various things that we're interfacing, like we're sort of squishing up against our environment in ways that we can't probably even fully imagine, that are in the consciousness of these crazy sociopaths. Again, that we need to understand this as a history of domination. And Stephen Newcomb, if I often recommend his book, it's very useful of understanding the trajectory here and its connection to the Vatican, which is, if those of you have listened to me before, the Vatican is integral. Many faith communities, but especially the ones that have large endowments, the Vatican Bank in the impact investing space. So they will take care of our trauma, but it will be done through on their terms with their metrics and with their biosensors. And what Stephen often talks about is the use of DOM, word spells, and DOM in domination being an integral part of freedom. And that this idea of freedom that is so central to many in the resistance movement actually means that you have agreed to be a citizen of the empire, but that those who are running the empire will grant you a limited number of rights as a citizen of the empire, but you cannot choose to not be a citizen of the empire, because at that point, then you become a threat to the system and you must be erased off the planet, which is so indigenous erasure is central here. And I would say what's coming, I think, is actually artificial intelligence as this end game settler colonizer. And I've spoken of this before, is that the settler colonizer is the idea that it is not simply controlling original people. You come to an area and there are people there, and to control them and make them work for you, but that their existence is so problematic that you actually have to remove them entirely. And so I sort of frame this as a colonization project, that if you imagine that the things that are coming, and Stephen says the original people of Turtle Island had no clue when the invaders came in their ships, the consciousness, the mind construct of the people who were on the ships, like they couldn't even imagine the future that was being planned for them by those people. There was no common language, there was no common understanding. And it was only much later that the full realization of the planned harm became apparent. And by that point, it was almost too late, right? I mean, and those cultures have not been totally erased by any means, but there was grave, grave harm and injustice caused. And so what I'm saying is that if we understand this is what's coming is a bio-nanotech imperialism, a colonization of our very cells, even our very neural activities, that is what's coming, and that those tools are blockchain and the spatial web, the nanoelectronics and electromagnetic frequencies. And that just as the original people of Turtle Island couldn't imagine the mindset of the people on the invader ships, is that we cannot. Most people, I would say, 98.5% of the people out there, unless you're actually doing this research, can even have a concept of what's planned. And I feel like we're sitting ducks unless we can wrap our heads around it. Again, not from a place of despondence, but if you don't know the weapons that are being arrayed against you, you can't figure out what the optimal strategy is. So this is Lincoln Cannon, and this is just a very short clip, but he's talking about technologies and that they might not actually be recognizable. He is talking about this in the context of this Mormon transhumanist conference, which again, I will restate, is not representative of the vast majority of adherents of that faith. But I believe, looking at his LinkedIn profile and knowing the investments in biotech and technology of the church, that his presence and his thoughts are something that should not be dismissed and should be taken into account very much. So listen to this with the idea of electronics and frequency in mind.
Maybe you just don't see anything in this picture that you recognize as technology. And just because technology isn't obvious doesn't mean it's absent.
Okay. So there we go. He said, just because you don't recognize the technology, what you see as technology, or that you can't see it, doesn't mean it's not there. And to me, that seems very, very much in line with what we understand about nanoelectronics right now.
Maybe you just don't see any.
Let me see, let me clip out. So again, in the military conquest, and again, we have to understand that we are a military engagement. And I've restated, I think it's hard for many of us to wrap our minds around the fact that the institutions of governance, the institutions of education, the institutions of social care could be arrayed against us in this way. But that people, indigenous people, Black and brown people of the United States, many of whom know that the system was never set up to meet their needs, right? I mean, even this country has been set up in ways that the Constitution was to advantage men who held private property and not so much other people. And so once we kind of come to terms with this, we should not be super shocked that we are engaged in an information warfare scenario in which the tools that are being arrayed against us, including domestic populations, we don't recognize. So this is an image from Denis Kucinich. This legislation did not pass. It was reintroduced in 2005. It did not pass, but it was a Space Preservation Act. And when I talk about the weapons that are underway, it's kind of blurry, so I'm going to read it out loud, but this was to keep space peaceful was the proposal. And among the weapons of concern listed were electronic, psychotronic, or information weapons, chemtrails, high altitude, ultra low frequency weapon systems, plasma, electromagnetic, sonic or ultrasonic weapons, laser weapon systems, strategic, theater, tactical, or extraterrestrial weapons, and chemical, biological, environmental, climate, or tectonic weapons. Now, I will say when I looked at his updated version in 2005 that was reintroduced, these definitions were not in that. So it was only in the original one. But in 2001, which is 20 years ago, there was enough concern about the use of weaponized environment and frequency weapons that someone was writing legislation about it. And I would say that's something that is not commonly understood. This larger scenario is we're existing under a space fence, Lockheed Martin being a major contender in this. And the fact that what we're seeing now under the biosurveillance state is our life controlled by geofencing, which is being run through the satellite systems, through the weaponized atmospheric systems that were sold to us in many ways as a convenience. Like, hey, you know, you'll have a nice Google Maps and you can get where you want to go, only now we'll also know where you are. We will be able to use our satellites to create an augmented reality layer on your world and add lots of information of various kinds, but it's going to be backed by the CIA, and that we will be able to create borders at will, which are not national borders any longer, but the borders could be anything from your home to a limited distance from your house to a state border. It can be at will. And so one of the things I'm trying to convey as we try to unify a movement against what I think is this settler colonizer AI is that it is not the immigrants who are our problems. At this point, the new version of globalization will pit every human being on the planet against every other human being, and that we need to come at this from a place of global solidarity, because the game that we're in is a global game, and that it is the elite sociopath transhumanists against everyone else. Again, with the fear, someone asked about fear. They do want to keep us afraid. And actually, I think Andrew Kaufman has spoken about this almost as if fear is a contagion, as being an element of health, right? People who are in a fearful state find it much more difficult to maintain a balanced, stable, good health status. In this, our ability to engage in our environment in these frequency weapons, fear is a big piece of it, and also limiting our chemosensory access. So some of that we've talked about, the heart space, keeping people distant, but also even, this is Steffers again, this is one of her pieces. She talks about using sensory elements that we're not even aware of, but the military knows that they work. And so this was an experiment with the Air Force, this handshake experiment, where it was set up where someone would walk into a room and they would shake the person's hand for, thank you for being part of this experiment. Just wait here for a few minutes and I'll be right back. And essentially what the experiment was to track how people reacted after that handshake. And a very high percentage of people would touch their face. They would like rub their nose or rub their eye or do something that indicated that they were getting chemical sensory information off of that physical exchange that was informing their maybe unconscious understanding of that other human being. And that is how we understand the world, through these chemical signals that, again, it's not really fair because we might not even know that we are processing our interactions this way, but it feeds into our understanding of how we relate to each other, but the military does. So that is being dampened. And then the other element of this is another one of Steffers' piece of mindful, is looking at making our senses inaccessible, right? In this 2D flat world, really limiting even within our relatively narrow bandwidth of sensory processing, making it even more limited. And so some of these technologies are framed as dual use. And this one, this person investigated Febreze. And so Febreze is this idea of a smell canceling product that was developed by Procter & Gamble. And it didn't actually make the smell molecules go away, but it made them chemically unavailable to your sensory organs. And as it turned out later, this starch molecule that was sort of a donut hole that would fit the smell molecule into it was later actually used for medical interventions because it could cross the blood-brain barrier. So we have all of these elements of research that I think, as we understand the health tech transhumanist space, that are really worth digging into. And Steffers here has done really important work looking at how they are manipulating our sensory access. And in this space, I would say, you know, I keep talking about our little, my nature panopticon here, that we have the Wood Wide Web. My friend Phil had recommended last year before I went to South Dakota, a wonderful book, I think The Secret Life of Trees, that was talking about how beings have electrical signals to express their sense of happiness or danger, and that it works in concert with fungi and bacteria in the soil, and that really the universe is already a ubiquitous sensing environment, but they're looking to militarize that. And so in this space, the image on the right is one of sacred mutualism, that we are part of this interconnected network of electrical systems, which, you know, many of the people who have actually asked me to come speak are people who are connected, who are well-versed in Rudolf Steiner's teaching of understanding the energetic systems, but that is all looking to be standardized and put into a sensor-based spatial web blockchain network that is under militarized surveillance, and to replace true trust that is based in our own understandings of being able to hug, to shake hands, to sit in community with people and assess people's, you know, how we want to relate to people in a communal way with something that is on blockchain and a social credit score. Like, that is what we're looking at. So Jason, you want me to take a minute and just, are there any questions, or should I keep going?
Yeah, I have some. Yeah,
okay.
We can, I have actually quite a few. So let's do that.
We might need more talks. I'm going through this pretty slow. Are you up? Could we do one more hour, or should we, like, do you want to hard stop at 5?
I have time.
Okay.
If you have time,
all right.
If the audience has time.
We'll make them. They can always come back to it on recording.
That's true. And I'm actually going to create a higher resolution, a little bit better quality version of this after the stream is done. So anyway, so let's go through these. The first question is Sweden the pilot?
Oh, interesting. Well, there are many elements to Sweden. I can't say for sure that it's the pilot, but clearly Nordic Scandinavia, when I was doing my work in the impact space, was very central to, because they had a pretty robust social safety net, and all of the impact data collection was being sort of woven into the existing, you know, I guess, level of state dependency, which didn't sound so bad until you imagine it all being hooked up to a militarized panopticon. That from the impact investment space, very much so. The first health impact bond is actually coming out of Sweden. And that is a diabetes impact bond done in connection with Social Finance Israel. And Sweden actually has a lot of work on smart textiles. And they were collaborating with Stanford on sort of smart shirts that were going to track your health status. And I can't remember the family. It wasn't Wallenberg, I think, in Sweden. So Sweden is also Ericsson, and Ericsson is very high level, fourth industrial revolution, automation, robotics. Now, I would say, like, beyond Sweden, really, there are quite a few, because Estonia is the model e-government. And then I would say looking increasingly at Finland as well, because in the Internet of Things sensor space, Ericsson and Nokia are very key players. And then even now, Nokia is based in Finland. Nokia is like hand in hand with Bell Labs here in the US. And I was just looking up their headquarters is in northern New Jersey. So the internet of everything is, and then of course you have Norway, and I'll touch on Norway later, but Norway, oh gosh, what is her name? Brundtland, Gro Harlem Brundtland, the Hillary Clinton of Norway. She set up the whole Agenda 21 and the Rio Summit and is deeply involved in both global health tracking and CP and other things. So Norway is doing a lot with innovative sustainability and graphene batteries, actually. I have a slide on that later. So I don't know that strictly Sweden is the one pilot, but I would say that Scandinavia has a special role to play in what is unfolding that is both linked to high-tech automation and Internet of Things and impact investing and smart sustainability. That's what I have added. I mean, I knew all of that when people were running around saying like, look, we should be like Sweden. And I feel in some respects, the Sweden equivalency is a little bit like Texas and Florida, that there's like, oh, look, look over here. And like, if they want you to look over there, it's for a reason. And it's probably not the reason that is going to advantage you. There's probably something, dig a little deeper. There's more to that story.
Okay, so is autism prototyping for the transhumanist soft robot they look to create?
I mean, that's a hard one. I mean, I have to say, I think I did a webinar on impact investing in autism. And I think it's important to understand that any chronic illness is sort of being set up for this pay for success finance, because what they can do, especially if it's a lifelong chronic illness like diabetes, autism, I mean, they're even moving it into dyslexia, as if you can put a cost offset on it and then try to address some sort of mediation, often a digital intervention to manage that illness. Then it creates an impact market and creates a market for more biosensors. I will say that there is a certain type of mindset that is attractive to the work that I think those in power want to have done. And if you look at the Unit 990, which is the Israeli Defense Forces, they specifically have a lot of language about how they're specifically recruiting people on the spectrum to do this work of satellite imagery analysis. And so it's clear that there's a level of focus and attention to detail and the ability to spend lots of time on a very focused task that they find admirable for certain kinds of work. So I think if we look at sort of the Brave New World model, in knowing that a lot of this is based in eugenics, the gene therapies, the managing reproduction, that there will be different models of minds and bodies that they will want to inhabit this new world. And I think it's important to look at how individuals and families of people on the spectrum are being managed through this finance matrix, because I think it's not right, and people deserve to have a full picture and understand, again, if there's an incentive to have people function a certain way. I think that there are questions, again, about all of these things, about harmful medical interventions, injuries that happen, and even things that would happen even before birth around this world that they're building. Because I think even in retrospect, the changes that they're planning in the education space, I spent a lot of time, they were focused on grit and resilience. And so again, if you think that there are certain minds, they want to know from a behavioral health standpoint, who is going to navigate this world without falling apart, right? And who's going to navigate it in such a way that they may need digital therapeutics to help them navigate it, and that create impact markets, and having all of that based in artificial intelligence and predictive profiling. So there are many concerns that I have with both the minds and bodies that they seek to inhabit a world that is increasingly post-human. And I can say for sure that families of individuals and families who are experiencing, who are on the spectrum, need to understand how that fits into the finance and digital surveillance elements of this narrative.
Okay. Do you draw a distinction between blockchain as it is involved in Bitcoin versus in central bank digital currencies? Or do you think it's equally pernicious? So the idea around people that are independently trying to use blockchain for whatever their purposes versus the organized institutional central bank promotion of it. Do you draw any difference between the two?
Well, yeah, I've been pretty clear about this on my past statements, but so it's important that people understand where I came into my blockchain research from. And from my earliest blogs in early 2017, I was interrogating blockchain because I understood it as being part of tracking impact investing. And my exposure to it was around putting toddlers on blockchain and them framing it that these toddlers would build social capital by having a blockchain identity and performing good behavior in preschool. And then the next thing I understood was that blockchain was going to be used to track prenatal healthcare compliance and global humanitarian aid. So, and these were women in Tanzania who were being given prenatal care, which I fully agree with, but at the same time, it is unclear whether that is the care of their choice. And oftentimes these global aid systems are tied to big pharma. So tying somebody's compliance potentially to a big pharmaceutical company's prenatal protocol, I believe is a system of domination, and having blockchain behavioral script tied to that is a terrible, terrible thing. And then the next thing I looked at was using humanitarian aid to track refugee populations and to gather their biometrics and have their grocery payments tied to that. Okay, so this was my introduction to blockchain. And then also the state of Illinois that was looking at putting people's access to food benefits on SNAP benefits on blockchain and coding it with good behavior and saying what was the good food choice and what was the bad food choice, and tracking it and having financial incentives attached to it, and putting the digital pilot to put Illinois babies on blockchain. Okay, birth certificates, having all the birth certificates on blockchain. So if and then later on, I mean, this is not even to like talk about cell therapies on blockchain and blockchain brains and blockchain gamification. Like there are many, many elements. And I find that the conversation, really most people, I would say 80% of the people are talking about it in terms of finance, and then to a certain extent media, right? And they're not talking about any of the other stuff. I really have yet to find many people, handful, there's like a small handful of people who are willing to surface what is actually going on with blockchain and the spatial web, and understanding that blockchain is about tracking you as a character in the video game run by the CIA. And so, I find it very difficult to believe that people are operating from a place of good faith if they're not giving equal airtime to all of these other elements and framing it as a liberation. Because at what cost is your financial security if what you're saying is, by not interrogating the system, children in Africa or children in Illinois are going to be put on blockchain at birth or pre-birth? That's pretty horrific. And I've actually had people tell me, well, there's nothing we can do about it, so just invest better on your crypto. And to me, my whole framing is that this is a spiritual engagement. This is us being asked to be better humans than we have been, and that we need to come at this from a place of trying to make things right, even against maybe what seems to be insurmountable odds. And so karmically, I think if you step into this space from a place of saying, well, there's nothing we can do about putting babies on blockchain, or putting trees on blockchain, or putting other living beings on blockchain so they can be part of an impact market, then I don't think we're on that right road. And that's my position. I know I'm an outlier in that position, but because of my journey and how I got here, that's the hard line I take.
Okay. Yeah, I think that it's inevitable argument kind of ties in with the utopian argument that someone's arguing against something means that they're arguing for like a perfect world or something, which is just crazy. It's like, no, you can draw a line in the sand and say, no, we shouldn't cross this. You know, I've always had a difficult time with that.
That's one of my few lines.
Oh, what is?
The blockchain.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And it's reasonable for those.
I mean, I just find it annoying because there are people who would represent that somehow this is a new thing for me, which is entirely inaccurate.
Correct. Okay. So this next one, how will anyone escape being vaxxed and tracked?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I think, yeah, I don't have the answer to all of that.
You're supposed to have the answer to everything. I'm ending this interview right now because this is just ridiculous.
I don't know. Maybe we'll all end up like wandering the wilderness and die of exposure. I don't really know how it's all going to go. I mean, I think, you know, and I think that's one of those things is I was raised up in the system of like, here's the roadmap, right? Here's the roadmap to the American dream. Like you do well in school, you get good grades, you try to get a scholarship, you try to go to college, try to get this, you know, the starter house. Like that's out the window, guys. It's all like it was all a myth, right? But increasingly, I think it's so I take it one day at a time, right? Like that's what I'm sort of like, build your beautiful life with people you care about one day at a time and try to live in truth. And then who knows how much time we have to do that thing, right? Like who knows, practice your faith, find something sacred to you. And I'm not saying that there's any one that's right, but like dig in because this is this moment. And if you stay in the place of fear about what happens, like I was, you know, I've been very fearful, but I think many things that I thought were going to happen in a very short order haven't yet happened. And so part of the destabilization protocol, I think, is to keep things in uncertain spaces. So just, I would say as much as people can hold on to their practice of like trying to be a good human in the time you have and live with that. And I will say maybe it's easier for me because I'm in my 50s. I think if I was in my 30s, I would feel very different about it and I would feel really ripped off. But
have you ever heard of a company named Twist Bioscene? And this is related to another aspect, instead of just body energy, matrix-like battery, but dealing with DNA as storage, as data storage.
I think so. I mean, it's been a while since I looked at it. I know a lot of that is coming out of University of Washington, had done the readable and writable DNA. And right now, I think it's framed as outside of like a synthetic product. It's like in a tank somewhere, but it's unclear. Like clearly we are already electrical computational beings. And so at what point does that get introduced into living systems? But I haven't done a deep dive into it lately. It was something I sort of touched on a while ago, but I haven't revisited it.
When they come, and they are coming, what do we do? That's a pretty generic question, but do you want to answer that or do you want me to?
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to like everybody is on their own path, right? And people are at different places in their journey, different places in their understanding, different places of access, privilege. You know, I think everybody's going to have to make their own. I think what they most want is to frame is an aggressive response that they can frame as treason or sedition or harmful positions as opposed to principled stands, right? And so I think as we choose our path, we need to keep in mind that I think that they would intend to use the energy of anger against us. Like if that's the place that we can come to, not that it's not easy to be angry or to not be angry or fearful about it, but that's why I've tried to, you know, center myself in the dandelions and these other things, which may totally not resonate with a lot of people. I get people found that that's not practical and they're really interested in practical solutions. And I'm not here to say that my way is in any way right. It's the way that feels right to me and gives me agency. And I think provides a useful counter narrative in terms of how we resist. Because some of it is frequency and who knows? I mean, again, I was never one of these, like I knew nothing of energy, healing, frequency, cyber. I mean, I knew a little bit of the cybernetics with the tech, but we don't know how powerful we are. We don't actually know. Like sometimes you cause whip. To me, it feels like there's this egregore, and if we stand from a principled place and refuse it, who knows how that eventually will get the morphic field and we'll break this thing up, right? Like they're using, I think, some dark arts in this overall thing, and I think there's a place of spirit to dispel some of that. And I will say I would encourage people to, I put on my Facebook feed and my Twitter feed at Philly852. I got actually my first video that someone shared with me of a dandelion revocation beyond the ones that I've done. Now, I know people probably out there have been doing them, but I haven't seen a video of it. And it was actually at the lobby of the Moonshot project in Japan, in Tokyo. And it was incredibly touching to have that be the first one, because that is the full-on transhumanist project. And who knows what would happen in the world if we had a peaceful revolution of dandelions and refusals. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Mostly, I don't know if they put that into the sentient world simulation yet. We'll see.
Okay. When the Biden people send out pro-vaxxers and try collecting data, again, this is another, what do we do? How do we deal with difficult people who are experiencing cognitive dissonance? So this is just, how do you deal with people that aren't seeing? And I'll just ask another question while I'm here, and then I'll let you go. Well, I have several more, but I'm going to just do a few of them at a time. And then, does the human race have enough people who are awake to stop this madness? And another one is, do you think that our physiological thought process, if coming from a place of pure and genuine intention, along with belief in our own spiritual and quantum biology, is enough to overcome the negative foreign elements being put into our bodies? If not, apart from avoiding harmful substances, terrain, etc., do you have any suggestions for other things that we can do to assist and or prevent some of the negative adverse health reactions?
So I would say on the people who are having cognitive dissonance, I mean, as Cliff taught me, is that you can't change anybody. You can't convince people, have to come to it themselves. And you can put your intention out in the world, and the intercessor will take it where it needs to go. And you may never know who you touch, you know, who the book you write, or the blog post you post, or your action, how it touches other people. And the people you most want it to touch, it may do nothing. And other people, it may have a profound influence. So I would say just try to come from a place of care and model the person that you want to be, you know, and then eventually, I think as things surface, you know, most of the stuff I talk about, I don't really talk about, I don't use the words that they ban on here. I talk about bigger things. So, and as far as I'm trying to, like, what we can do for our bodies, I would love, Jason, you're laughing. There must be a good question. I don't know. I don't have all the answers, guys. I'm figuring this shit out with all of us as we go along. This is a collective, right? But I'm hearing, like, there's people who are way more informed about detoxing, you know, I don't know, cilantro, like, but we need to know what we're dealing with. And if what we're dealing with is frequency and nanotech and not something that they're saying it is, then that's the thing we need to address. And people who are far more skilled in the holistic health space, like, that would be great. Like, if we're dealing with frequency, what is it choral, right? Is it music? Is it a frequency of love? How do we go about that? And so that's what I think that we should be working on is what does that piece look like? And maybe if we're doing that collectively, then doing that together will be even more powerful. And I'm trying to remember the other thing about, like, the morphic, like there was a second one in the middle I missed, I think.
Oh shoot, I deleted it already.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I mean, I think we are powerful. Like, I mean, I don't have all the answers, guys. Like, I don't claim to be an expert in this. All I'm doing is sharing my lived experience and my frame and seeing if it helps other people. And if it doesn't, that's okay. You go do you. And for those that it helps, then cool. Like, let's keep talking. Oh, and then one thing I will say is someone else had talked about homeopathy around graphene. And so again, that is not my wheelhouse whatsoever, but like we have a lot of smart minds. So I think we should be able to start figuring this out.
Yeah, and I was laughing earlier at my mind just I start thinking about stuff when there was something you said. I just thought about the overused cliche phrases of be the change you wish to see in the world and never doubt that a small group of people, what's the Margaret Mead quote that everybody quotes, that they're overused. I mean, like, yeah, I agree with them, but it's also they become cliches at this point. And that was why I was kind of laughing.
Oh, you're laughing at me, huh? Well, I mean,
no, I wasn't laughing at you. I wasn't laughing at you at all. I was laughing at my own thought process.
If you have a finite amount of time left, try to live it from a good place as best you can, right? Like, and I think increasingly this whole journey has taught me to be like less materialistic and more engaged in like small serendipitous, beautiful things that I encounter and relationships, and find that, because that's the thing that pisses them off more than anything is that. And will that be enough? I don't know. But, you know, like I said, my friend had shared with me, you know, this talk about, you know, a Lakota story about God wanting to end the world and the eagle saying like, wait, let me look, you know, and finally finding a couple people who were still doing the right thing and coming back and said, it's not many, there are not many out there, but there's a few. And it was enough to hold the thing off. So in that, I kind of hold that story in my heart. Like, I don't think this idea that we need to wake up the whole world, it's not that. I feel like in some ways, God is placed on our hearts, some of us to see this thing. And then it is this engagement of, are we willing to come at this from a place of care and love and peace and sacredness, or are we going to walk away and look away from it? And so those of us who have been tasked with this thing, do we do the best job we can? And I don't know, it's hard. I'm not saying I'm perfect at this. Like, I mean, I'm struggling with my father's elder care, and I'm feeling like a terrible human right now, and like trying to navigate this and that, and like figuring out which is the thing that's going to serve the world better. Like for me doing this, or me walking away from everything and becoming a 24/7 caregiver to my father. And that may be the thing that ends up being is that the thing that saves the world? I don't know. But like those are the things that are on my mind that I'm trying to sort through right now.
Well, I don't know. I don't want to chime in on that, but I would say that there are a lot of people that are doing caretaking in this world. There aren't a lot of people that are doing the research that you're doing. So, of course, I'm not going to chime in on that.
But I know it's hard. It's like, I am in no way like sort of poofing up like, oh, we'll just meditate this all. Like, I don't think that either, but I do think that there's something that we're supposed to be doing. And part of it is that we have to figure it out as we do it with each other as best we can.
Okay, so I will read 3 more, and then maybe you have more presentation today, correct?
Yeah, I could. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
so let me
next and then
I'm just going to read 4 in a row, and then we'll stop and come back. So I'm trying to keep up with all these. Is the plan to eliminate the natural environment so that it is unavailable for dissidents? Another question is, technocracy is hijacking transhumanism. Reason, science, and tech are being taken down anti-life biomimetic paths, the crystalline. But is that not a transhumanist problem? What do you think? I'm not really sure how that okay, maybe you understand that question better than I do. And then someone asked, are you referring to Wu Cliff? And then one more, I don't know if you can remember all these, but isn't why 70 years of chemtrails, fluoride, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, isn't that why we're seeing this? Okay, go for it.
Okay. Oh gosh. All right. So remind me the first one again.
Okay. Is the plan to eliminate the natural environment so that it is unavailable?
So I think
for
that's
dissidents?
pretty clear. Like that's Agenda 21. That's pushing us into smart cities, mega regions. You know, a lot of what's happening with the wildlife trackers and putting cameras and stuff all over the forest land and public land, like that is all part of that agenda. Like they want to contain us because if we're sort of all in the people zoo, we're going to be easier to learn for the biocomputing. And the same for, you know, putting sensors on all the animals in the name of environmentalism. That's part of how that's going to work. I mean, I would say ultimately, as I see it, and again, this is just my analysis, is that all of the isms are not like, they're relevant and they're historically interesting and they're relevant. But my take, for what it's worth, is that they are trying to unlock the code of life to become God. At the end of the day, that's how I feel things are, what they are. And like, if you want to put ism on that, like, I think transhumanism is the step to that, because the unlocking happens through transhumanism. And in some ways, technocracy, communitarianism, or pay for success finance is about getting people on the blockchain to get the Internet of Bodies data, to create transhumanism, to create the God thing. But it's like a continuum. And then let's see, what was the one after transhumanism? I'm sorry.
Are you referring to Woo Cliff?
Oh, Woo Cliff. Well, I don't know. That might be Clifford Gomes had given me a lot of teachings, and he actually has his own YouTube channel now. So I would recommend you look it up. He has like a nice introductory talk on there too. So Clifford Gomes, Gomes, and Cliff helped me out a lot because it got really dark like through a lot of this. But I think if his teachings are really helpful. And then the last one was
70 years of chemtrails, fluoride.
Oh yeah, is that why we're at here? Well, I mean, clearly toxins are huge. And I think that was part of my awakening, was understanding how interconnected the whole chemical industry was towards, I mean, really in many respects, sort of the crippling that will likely happen as part of the, you know, medical interventions or the nano-particulates, the engineered nanoparticles are just a continuation of the cancer, right? The cancer programs and everything else. So we've been being poisoned for a really, really long time. And I can't really explain why some people are able to still maintain a more sharp analysis of what's happening than other people. You know, I really went along with most things. I'm really late to this game. Really, I only started out in 2013. And I drink fluoridated water. So I don't, you know, I can't, I've been pretty normal, like a pretty normal, regular person. So that's why I do sort of sometimes wonder about the frequency weapons, but maybe there are things that are unknowable. And that's, I think it's in that other dimension of the unknowable that is our power, if we can accept that it's out there and that by acting in good faith that we can access it, even if we don't know exactly how we're accessing it.
Okay, well, you want to share your screen again and continue on, and then we'll come back to more questions later.
Okay. All right. Keepers of natural life. I'm just going to remind myself what these slides are. Okay, so this is just touching again on the planetary computer, you know, and this is something that we've gone over in the questions, but this idea of the climate element and the One Health pandemic management is going to be part of this. The barcode of life, again, getting everything on blockchain, getting the data analytics on everything to run the simulation, and Microsoft working on the planetary computer, again, all in the name of sustainability. This is one of the papers that I shared online that Joseph said that was very, very important. It's about the idea of information cyber warfare. And I've touched on this previously in the introduction, but the idea of the architecture of information, that the universe is made of information, and how we receive it and how we transmit it is vital, and who controls the flow. So if what we understand that we're living through now is a military engagement based on information systems, that is central to this program. And this paper was actually written, I think, in the mid 1990s. It was foreseeing, it was a foresight document around the military in 2025, that that these battles, the military engagements may not be in any way how we imagine military engagement right now. And I would say it's interesting if you look at the constellation there with the wings and I don't know, like the angel or whatever, the Mormon transhumanists have a very similar set of wings on their wheel, their settler colonial wheel there. I will say the other element that is important to understand around virology and electron microscopy is that if we're living increasingly in a two-dimensional world, that they can start to create virtual worlds in cyberspace that influence the real world. And so in this way, this model out of the University of Chicago, they created the computational model of a virus. And that is what is influencing the policies that are influencing the real material world now. It's a computational model. It's not a physical. It's not like you can see it in the physical world. It's an aggregation of data that was made through this microscopy and algorithms. So in some respects, it's a constructed reality that exists according to the University of Chicago, which is a center for impact investing and human capital finance. So in many ways, we should not be surprised that these two institutions, like the same institution is doing both sides, right? Is constructing the model that will keep people contained in the biosurveillance state and then is also doing the human capital investing. I've spoken about this in greater detail in other talks, but again, just to touch on cybernetics, engineering the environment, that the rules of the game that we're playing, that we're being played in, the augmented reality is tied to the Sustainable Development Goals. That is why, again, Norway and Scandinavia are so central. It's these 17 goals that are largely about poverty management, but about taking the natural world and including like the little fungi and putting a sensor on it and containing it up in the block. Now, the blockchain, you will notice in many of the graphic design elements that are ubiquitous throughout the Fourth Industrial Revolution, is the cube is also a hexagon. So it inverts and it flips. So that the hexing, the hex tiles, the hexagon, and the cube are all integral. And I had spoken before about the blockchain protocol, tracking impact and feeding to the singularity. That is what this is all about, IXO Foundation. But here we are, we're keeping, we're the keepers of life. And I think that is our charge for as long as we still have natural life, is to keep that, to keep up with the dandelions. And I'm in Philadelphia and I increasingly have a very difficult time with the 4th of July, and they're shooting fireworks off of the art museum, which is at the end of my neighborhood. It's was a indigenous mound, and now it's topped by the art museum, and they're shooting these military fireworks off. And so I escaped on the 4th of July and actually went down to, this isn't the actual creek, but it's very similar, the Wissahickon Creek, near where the Kelpius monks were waiting for the woman of the wilderness. And I brought my little poppet, the little lady in green, and she's the one I took and left in upstate New York. And I just needed to put my feet in the water and sort of connect with the natural systems. And I took a Bible, I read my Bible, I took some candles, I took some sage, and I just spent some time in the universe. And what I saw there, and it's quite dark, actually, even though it's in the middle of the city, it's in a sort of a ravine, were these amazing fireflies. And I still need to write this up, but that the fireflies in the forest were so incredibly beautiful. Like they were the sort of the inversion of the really over the top fireworks, in the art museum. It was this quiet, natural beauty. And, I got to thinking, there were these really ancient boulders and of Wissahickon schist, which is a very ancient rock formation, and then these fireflies. And I thought, well, what is their time frame? Like some of this is about manipulating time and what time we have. And so I looked it up and I said, well, how long do fireflies live? And it was about like 1 to 2 years, mostly in the larval stage. But when I was looking at it, it said actually that the light of the firefly light is the luciferase, right? So a lot of these photonics and optogenetics and staining with the quantum dots are tied to this luciferase, which is actually about the lightning bugs. It's a cool heat. It's the most efficient light there is because it gives off no heat. And I thought, wow, I'm always talking about being here for the bees, but increasingly we need to be here for the lightning bugs too. And part of this on the blockchain, and I didn't get a chance to talk about this, but this idea of economic transactions and everything being recorded in this very minute detail with all the metadata attached. And that my contrast to this was spending time last summer on indigenous land and having the real gift to see a gift economy in action, a giveaway, and the communal binds that were put together with people giving these really generous gifts of quilts and handmade items and all sorts of things, including, like, to me, they gave me some star fabric, and being a part of that intangible economy of interconnectedness where we are all connected to one another. And so I think entertaining what does a gift economy look like going forward as the counterbalance to this blockchain idea. And in the gifting, some of you have seen, a friend actually did beautiful artwork about the dandelion that I was able to then upload onto a fabric place. And so I've been printing out this dandelion fabric and giving them away at all of my talks and like leaving. And it was her gift to me of this artwork. And it was my gift to other people of the patches. And then creating this exchange that carries the message beyond this immediate narrow narrative that they're putting into a broader narrative to start other conversations. So, you know, I just want to put that out about like within the blockchain context. And giving this talk in upstate New York was really important because this was actually the site of the Iroquois Confederacy, and this idea of tribal groups that were at odds coming together to strengthen one another, and that they did this on Onondaga Lake. And part of it was that they buried their weapons under a white pine tree, and then a golden eagle lit on the pine tree. And so in this, you know, I've called for, even before the past year, like a global peace movement of moms against AI, like scrappy moms against AI, not to exclude dads, but often it's moms, it's the sacred feminine, is like, we don't want the planetary computer of AI. We want actually the natural beingness of being on this planet. And so to assert a peace movement in this place of peace and coming together felt really important. And so some of us, actually, there were 3 of us that did a small gathering on the lake that day, and someone was so beautiful and brought me a dandelion in a pot and said, this is actually, dandelion is really tasty, and so you should keep it because it tastes good, and you should keep it for yourself. But I really felt, we actually wrote down on bark from the garden that I work at, it was sloughed off bark from a London plane tree, all the weapons that were being used against us, blockchain, AI, nanoelectronics, all of these things, and we put it in a hole. And then we put the dandelion on top, and then we ringed it with pine needles. And so part of it, I think for me, my practice is to reimagine, to like try to heal some of the big terrors in the sort of space-time continuum of harm, of trauma, and to do this with other people in ways that can maybe catalyze healing, and maybe in ways that we don't even know yet. But at that ceremony, we actually had an osprey and a bald eagle come. So it was quite powerful. So as Cliff says, love is already won. We just have to do the work. And this is images that we took from some gatherings we did at the solstice in Aberdeen, which is the proving ground, the cybernetics, the home of cybernetics, where ENIAC, the first general computing system, was brought to calculate missile trajectories. And in Aberdeen, we actually went to a natural area near the military base, and we did a little ceremony. And then a friend had found this pocket, which is a little satin pocket with sequins. And so Joseph had written a really beautiful piece about love in the universe, love as giving, ever expanding. And so that was part of our ceremony. So we put it in the pocket, and we actually took it outside the Masonic Lodge of Aberdeen, Maryland. And we left our love message that had sacred corn and shells and milkweed, which is what the butterflies eat to be toxic to the predators. And we surrounded it with briar rose, actually, because had been on a camp out, and I was trying to set up my tent, and the rose brambles kept grabbing me. And I was like, what's up with these brambles? And I'm like, oh no, this actually needs to be part of it. So we put our brambles around. This is another piece. This is leading into what Joseph had talked about, the singularity to conquer the universe. So expanding my idea that singularity isn't the end game. The end game is unlocking the keys to life. And this is this guy, Perry Marshall, who's a business consultant, and he's working with folks from Harvard, George Church, and Oxford to have this prize to unlock information systems around what life means. And I mean, 10 million, that's not even very much money if you actually hand over the keys to the universe, but that it is universal empire that is coming, and that people should look into this evolution 2.0. because again, what they're looking to do is flatten the world, flatten it into a 2-dimension. This is an image of us making this beautiful offering to the natural world on the banks of the Susquehanna with candles and offerings that people had given to us on ferns. And it had pine cones and apples and shells and minerals and beeswax candles, and we put our feet in the water that night, and we put our good intentions out into the world, because that's what they want to deny us, is access to the real world, and instead put us into the metaverse, which is 2-dimensional, which is a militarized space. And increasingly you're going to see narratives that it's selfish to want to live in the real world, that there's not enough resources in the real world, and that it's far more equitable to live online where everyone can have everything. But they're not talking about it as living in a military psyop. They're not talking about that at all. And actually that it is the inverse of having choice and autonomy to live in a built environment that's run by AI. But we're seeing this narrative. And again, on the education space, I've spent a lot of time in the past, in schools, and there was a big push for Flat Stanley. And Flat Stanley is this idea of like a little boy that travels as a piece of paper all over, and you take pictures of him in different geographies, and it's for geography teaching. But the idea is that people don't get to travel. It's just the Flat Stanley. It's this 2-dimensional construct. And I think a lot of this is predictive programming to condition the kids. And I have to say, a friend, I can't remember the name of this island, but it's part of the greater Miami area. And evidently the island where this Flat Stanley is one of the highest per capita income in the whole world. So the fact that Flat Stanley in the Wikipedia entry is there is kind of telling. But here's the Moonshot project, the cybernetics, and definitely go to my Twitter page. I'm going to put it on my PeerTube. My YouTube channel now has 2 strikes, so I kind of can't use it anymore. But I'm going to I have a PeerTube channel, and I'll put it there as well. But look at that revocation ceremony at the Moonshot project, because they want diversity to be diversity with human robots, with centaurs, to have this life where we're living through exoskeletons and projected consciousness. They're reimagining evolution into this cybernetic space as centaurs, as cyborgs, and increasingly looking at remaking Darwinian evolution, not about that random mutations change what our beingness is, but that living beings are intentionally designed according to an internal genetic program. And again, that is where they want to go. They want to unlock that genetic program so that they can be in charge. And this is happening through the selfish ledger experiment. It's linked to Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. And the selfish ledger is a thought experiment of Google from 2016. Now you have to understand all the ways in which Google is harvesting our data, from autonomous vehicles to smart cities to blockchain healthcare to I can't remember what Verily is, if that's also another healthcare. They're doing screening, medical screenings. They've got their own health system. They've got Nest Labs, which is tracking inside your house. They're developing all sorts of innovations to track every bit of data they can get about you to build these twins. And they reframe it that the idea is that the genomic sequence wants to replicate itself, and that essentially what they will do is create a digital system through user-centered design and behavioral economics and nudges and pricing and leaderboards to get you to give up all of your data to make you this digital twin. And this is the top half of this map. So again, it's talking about Lamarck, but this is this goal-driven leaderboard that if there's any tiny bit of intelligence, this bespoke Internet of Things data collection that it does not yet have on you to fill out your digital twin puzzle piece, they will 3D print it. They will use AI to figure out what they can get you to buy. They will 3D print it. They will figure out how to price it, and they will make you buy it, and then they will nudge you so they can get that data. And it is all linked to social physics, the Sustainable Development Goals, and predictive analytics and genomics. So really it's building this digital twin sequencing. And I think, Jason, I think this is my last one. I'll stop here. I mentioned Licklider. Joseph Licklider helped create the ARPANET, which became the internet. And he was into acoustics and psychology. And in that overall structuring plan of laying things out, he was talking about, in the April of 1963, an intergalactic network. and which he was sending to the computer scientists. So if you understand that all of this stuff, the selfish ledger, is to prepare our consciousness to be part of this intergalactic network, and that if they can compress our consciousness and get to code the world, it is universal domination. So I think that's probably, I will stop this share now, and that's probably a good place. I don't know if anybody has other questions.
Yeah, I've got a few here. So I'll start with well, first of all, have you read Nudge by Cass Sunstein?
I have not read Nudge itself, but I know, I mean, the whole behavioral behavioral innovation team was out of the UK. And so they were actually working with the International Rescue Committee and IBM and the Sesame Workshop on tracking the Syrian refugee children. And so I was familiar with Richard Thaler and that work, and Thaler's out of University of Chicago as well, to structure the behavioral economic systems through both London and then through the humanitarian aid system. And then Michael Bloomberg brought that whole system over to the United States and embedded it both in New York and also at Harvard Kennedy School. So that behavioral economics nudge piece, of which Cass Sunstein is a part. You know, Obama really developed the Social Innovation Fund. That was on his watch, and Sunstein was working for him.
Okay, so this isn't really a question that came up, but somebody on the thread was asking someone else on the thread about AMD PSP or Intel ME, which is actually a power saving thing. I don't really know what they were referring to, but I'm actually I'm in the process of building a new computer right now. So this is all fresh in my mind. Yeah. But one thing, I'm waiting for a graphics card, which is they're hard to come by right now. There's a shortage, but the company is NVIDIA.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if you've looked up. Yeah. So I went on their website because I'm just was looking to see if there was any information about the shortage of graphics card. And I noticed that they're very heavily involved with AI and self-driving cars. Yeah. And I just thought I would bring that up. I don't know if that's something that you've looked into, but AMD, which is and Intel are the main CPU processor companies, and then NVIDIA. Just curious if you.
Well, the thing about Intel is, I think a lot of Intel is based in Oregon, actually, or has a high presence in Oregon outside of Portland. And so, if you understand that the goal is to drive people into the metaverse, and that metaverse is built on a gaming environment, and the gaming environments are built on military simulation, along with sort of, Hollywood operation. Is a Mockingbird, the propaganda arm. So if you understand synthetic people and the metaverse are the birth, the wedding of Disney and Hollywood and the Army Research Lab, and that's out of the University of Southern California Institute for Creative Technologies. And that's been sort of on the books for, I think, at least since the early 2000s, that is where the metaverse lives. And there's a good book that I would recommend. Doctoral may be an asset, but he knows all the stuff. He's very LinkedIn. Cory Doctorow's book, For the Win. It's actually for young adults, but it's essentially about people living in a gaming universe and sort of trying to overthrow global capital through melding the digital gaming world. This is a kid in California, gaming with kids in China in the real world, the metaverse and the real world interfacing. And I think that's where we increasingly are. And NVIDIA is a central player in that. And I haven't looked at it lately. I did look into it a while ago, but I think I actually recently came across somebody had a post about Nancy Pelosi having significant investments in NVIDIA. So you have to understand that this metaverse, the two-dimensionality, is running on the cloud systems, but also the graphical interface systems. And a lot of what I've looked at in the Salt Lake City area, is that the University of Utah is a central player that I was not really aware of. When you're looking at the tech space, often it's Stanford or MIT or various, maybe Urbana-Champaign, but University of Utah was not so much on my radar. And I think actually their specialty was video compression files. So if you imagine what the metaverse looks like, it is a series of file folders that open and close depending on the tokens in your blockchain wallet. And my understanding, I'm not a gamer, but in gaming, you port from one part of a game to another part of a game. And you would have to port with a permission, and that's the blockchain smart contracts, right? You're not going to be able to access different parts of the metaverse if you don't have permission. And so in that space, the University of Utah, knowing that Salt Lake City is very integral, both with the University of Utah computing, and the video compression and some of the earliest digital objects were developed at the University of Utah, along with state intelligence at Bluffdale. But then they've got Silicon Slopes now, which is emergent, also with biotech and optogenetics. But one of the anchor tenants in Silicon Slopes was Adobe, which is an interesting choice of words if you understand Adobe as, earth and bricks, right? Well, Adobe software is anything but earth and bricks. Like, why would they choose that term, really? But the Adobe building is literally over the entrance to Silicon Slopes. It like brackets it. Like it's not a gated community, but there's a ceremonial entranceway, and to do it, you go actually under the corporate building. And so what I've been trying, and if there's tech people on here, I would be open to hearing what you think, is that if the metaverse is a series of file folders of experiences of gaming environments, and you're navigating these layers of folders which are compressed and decompressed depending on if they're in use or not, that the Adobe system is probably, both from the documentation and file compression software, going to be part of setting up the metaverse. Clearly, they're a major player in Salt Lake City, and I would be open if anybody has ideas to share on that, how that all works.
Okay. Just for my curiosity, have you read any of those science fiction authors? F. Herbert, R. Heinlein, I. Asimov, A.C. Clarke, a lot of pre-knowledge, included of nowadays mindset. So that question is about, have you, some of these authors that seem to have a lot of foresight on where we're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, not so much those. I mean, there is a huge amount of science fiction. I mean, I never used to read much science fiction, but then I really started when I started understanding the tech space better. I would say the books that I've read are more recent that inform my understanding. I would say in those lines, the science fiction actually We by Yevgeny Zamyatin, which is the precursor of all of those, which is, I think, from the early 1920s, is sort of a futuristic society where everyone is a number and has no privacy and lives in the panopticon. There's another book that's by Ira Levin called The Perfect Day. I can't ever remember if it's called One Perfect Day or The Perfect Day, by Ira Levin, who did The Stepford Wives and Rosemary's Baby. And that one is actually set up where the world is run by a giant computer, and everyone gets daily injections that keep them docile. And it's like a total technocratic society. And that was 1974. And then more recently, Rainbow's End by Werner Vinge. And Vinge was emeritus professor of computer science and mathematics at UC San Diego. And he actually posited the singularity. So Rainbow's End is sort of a near future dystopia. He wrote it in 2006, but everything is augmented reality. And so the real world is falling apart as people pick up through augmented vision and augmented wearables that they live in the universe of their choice. And actually, it's kind of fascinating because the opening involves an illness event, and a lot of the people are actually, there's a meeting about it in the square in front of the cathedral in Barcelona, and some of the entities are AI and some of them are holograms and some of them are real, and they talk about the people who are touristing have to pay extra for the touchy-feely experience. Like if you're there, not just as a hologram, like you have to pay premium price, like there's only so many slots. And so that's, anyway, but I would say the one that I would really recommend too is called The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson. And I think I need to read the other one, Snow Crasher. I think it's called Snow Crasher, that people have said is even better. But he was predicting all of this in 1995, and then later became the head of Magic Leap Virtual Reality, the head futurist of Magic Leap VR. I think he's since left, but he was positing nanobots, globalization, mega cities, AI, judicial tribunals. And there's a lot of stuff about frequency. And it's interesting, in the Diamond Age, there's actually a group called the Nano Factory that was looking at nano fabrication and trying to figure out how to actually make it happen at the molecular level, because there's this fat finger problem. Like, how could you actually even build these things? We don't have the machine available to build something at such a tiny scale. And they were working in this stuff called Diamondoid, which is, I think, another carbon-based system, but and maybe even related to petroleum processing, but these diamondoids, and that he was actually like, I think it came up, like, I'm trying to remember what the connection was, but like that it was referenced, like the Diamond Age, like there was a connection between the Diamondoid and the Diamond Age book. So this diamond, man-made diamond systems, I think, is part of it. And they often speak about graphene being like so strong, it's like a lattice of diamonds.
Okay. And actually, I just got this guy.
Oh yeah.
I haven't read it yet, but it's on my list.
It's good. Yeah, she's great.
So their future vision is Eon Flux meets Judge Dredd ? You may not know those references.
You want to help me
out? But it's pop culture. One was like an MTV show, and Judge Dredd, I don't even know Judge. I never even watched it. I saw like I saw a little bit of it, but we'll skip that because we don't know the references very well. Wasn't it Heinlein who said that specialization is for insects? I think that's, sorry, that was a rhetorical question.
Well, I will just say though, I mean, I do think, and that's part of like people are saying, or we're here because of like the chemical poisoning or, various things. But I think there's a huge amount that has to do with the educational system and the meritocracy of Western society and what is valued. And that increasingly the specialization, that if you specialize, you don't ever have to see the big picture and you don't ever have to deal with the moral consequences of knowing the big picture. And so that's something that I think is what I bring to my lens, is that I'm a landscape person. I'm an art history person and a landscape person. So I try to look at things from within the historic continuum and from within a geography, and, tentacular thinking or whatever, and conjecturing, being creative. Actually, Tom Cowan talks a little bit about this. We're just going to engage in speculation, but sometimes actually engaging in speculative concepts is helpful in knitting things together and making sense of the world. And so if what you reward in the system is that everyone has an absolute knowledge and that no one else can have that knowledge because you've attained it and you've run the gauntlet to it, so you're the only one entitled to that knowledge, no one else can play around with it, then that becomes a problem. And that's how we end up with tyranny of experts, because the experts can't even imagine that anything along the way was not correct, because then their whole identity falls apart, right?
And also, it's like if there is something that's incorrect, they then build on top of that incorrection, and so it becomes, even more dubious as time goes along if there's a foundational problem.
Yeah, and you have to unlearn a lot. That's what I'm realizing, is that you have to actually be willing to let things go, including things that feel really important, like sometimes including people you thought were heroes, including things like you have to actually be able to integrate new information. And if the new information is inconsistent with the old information, then reweigh it and decide what you're going to keep moving forward. And sometimes it means walking away from stuff that you used to find really important. And that's a psychic challenge.
Yeah, actually, someone suggested a key list of science fiction books to read, like a book list would be really cool. Maybe an idea for the website or something.
Yeah, if people want to contribute, maybe with a one-liner, because I've got my own ideas, but I know of a lot of other people. One of the short stories that I find really compelling, I think it's Philip K. Dick, The Hanging Stranger, which is the story about someone working underground or in a bank vault one day and coming out and seeing a guy who's been executed in the park, hanging in the park. And he's trying to figure out what happened, and nobody else sees a problem or realizes that there's anything wrong with it. And, eventually becomes chased into the next town. And then he becomes the hanging stranger in the next town because something is sort of body snatched everyone. And that they zapped him while he was in the bank vault, or, he was in the basement. And I feel that way a lot. Can you guys not see this hanging body in the park? That's not good. And nobody can seem to see it. Or very few people, not that many people can.
Okay. Can you please distinguish the subtleties between a cyborg and centaur, or provide a link to where I can learn more on the defining characteristics of the centaur? And then I'll just do another one real quick too. One Health, Eco Health. Any comments on Peter Daszak?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know Peter. More things to look up. I will say honest, the centaur, and I'm trying to remember the woman's name. It might be Amy Cruz. I have a slide in the deck later on, but she actually worked for DARPA and now works for a company called Platypus AI. And so she's really been advancing the centaur narrative. And I think a lot of it is part of the word spell. I've seen a couple things where they say, I think cyborg is more off-putting. Like it feels like it has a certain amount of baggage that people wouldn't aspire to necessarily want because of its positioning in TV and other things like the Borg, that it's not necessarily a good thing. And that by moving to a concept of the centaur, the way, and I believe her name is Amy, frames it, is that, the way they sell it is that it has the best of both things, right? Like humans are good at certain things and machine systems are good at other things. And so the optimal hybrid is that you have sort of this mind meld, and that the machine will do what it's good at and people will do what it's good at. And it will, therefore you can look at, satellite imagery of the faster than you can imagine, to be super accurate with it, because the machines are doing their thing and you're doing your thing. And it's this human machine interaction interface. I think it's a sales job, part of the sales job, because centaurs, they're also sort of astrological. I think it seems more accessible and it gets rid of the baggage of the cyborg labeling, but it's mostly the same thing as the human machine interface.
And then someone also asked, so is nature the enemy?
Who's enemy?
Right. Yeah, that's all it says. So nature is the enemy. I'm assuming they mean to those that are orchestrating this.
I mean, I feel like the image that I have of like the Wood Wide Web and the blockchain smart city, to me, that captures a lot. And actually, I had a young person, who was attending, and I think that image really struck them too. Is that I believe that nature and God and the non-synthetic life is on the side of, that is on our side. It's like on the non-transhumanist side. And so how we're able to access it, like how we're able to, again, not from a position of domination, because that's part of the problem, but how we can collaborate with nature, or how we can tap into that. I think these guys talk a good game, but like a lot of the stuff they talk about, they don't actually have locked in yet. And so we should treat what they say. We should treat it with seriousness and consideration and our eyes open for future developments, but that we shouldn't give them more credit than they actually have, that they've actually accomplished all the things they say they have. And I think nature is far more powerful and chaotic. So I think that is, I think us in this cosmic dance, I think that's what I have on Twitter. It's like, life in the cosmic dance is greater than AI. And so in that way, nature, I think is, I don't think I would call it a weapon as much as a collaborator in keeping the natural world natural.
Yeah. Well, on that, I think we've gone just about, we're coming up on 3 hours here. So I think we've done a pretty good stint.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. You just had a long talk yesterday too.
Yeah. I have a link created for tomorrow. I'm going to try to work it out so we can keep the same link, because I've got it's a long story, but Zoom is very limited on what you can do when you stream directly from Zoom. So I'm going to work on solving that. So I might have a new link for this tomorrow, or we might be able to use the link that we already have. But I will say this, that I know that Alison's work, and many others for that matter, is being suppressed pretty severely. I mean, right now it says we have concurrent viewers of 86. When I first, the first streams that I were doing with Alice had thousands of views. So as more people have become aware of this work, I guarantee the numbers haven't gone down. And so it's being suppressed, and I think we need to get a little bit more creative. and be a little bit more proactive about how we share this information. And so I encourage you to please, not only share the link, but download the video from YouTube. There's lots of YouTube downloaders out there where you can get the video and upload it to your channel, or put it on a flash drive and share it with somebody. I think we're going to have to get a little bit more creative on getting this information out to people. And yeah, I just wanted to say that I want to encourage everyone that's watching to help us. I create this live stream and I put it on, my channel, which has, 13,000 followers. Not huge, but I don't know how many people we're actually reaching here. I'm pretty sure that the number of viewers that they tell me is not the actual number of viewers. I'm assuming there are more people watching it, but I don't know. I don't actually know that.
And
but
I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to use my channel going forward, because I don't necessarily want everything disappeared. And at this point, I'm really loath. I don't know. It seems like people are reporting on me because something I was reported on disappeared and it was somewhere else and it didn't disappear. So yeah, at this point, it's probably archived, but I am trying to set up a PeerTube channel and I have a Telegram. So I send out the links that way. But please, this is for the collective, and, comment, share. I don't have all the answers. I'm not here to tell you that I know all the things. But I have been graced with information from pretty amazing people who have been thinking about things about nanotechnology and graphene that I'll get into more tomorrow, that are important to share. And at this point, I'm the face that is able to share it. So I'm happy to do that. But this is for all of us to interrogate, take apart, put it together, add your own stuff. But if we're going to figure out how to address it, we actually need to know what we're up against. And right now, there are large groups of people who don't even have this stuff on their radar. So it needs to be surfaced more.
Absolutely. And someone had mentioned BitChute. I have a BitChute account. I was putting the stuff up. I can't upload to BitChute now. I've tried many times and it just gets stuck in processing. So BitChute is not an option. And I kind of feel like in some ways BitChute is controlled as well. I mean, if you look at the stuff that gets on there, it's promoted. It's just garbage. But there is some good stuff there. It's just, you can't find it. You have to have the direct link. So BitChute's not a very good option. And I can't even upload even as a backup there now. I haven't been able to for months now. I've tried. I've tried with others as well. Odyssey, Alison had her stuff backed up on Odyssey, but it is a blockchain. There's some blockchain crypto attached to it. So didn't want that. I mean, it's anywhere you put it. There's no real good options right now that I've been able to find that are really great for, sharing video. But one thing that they can't get around is us actually making a copy of it and sharing it. Even like BitTorrent, I'm thinking about moving back towards, trying to put some of this stuff on BitTorrent. That's how I used to share a lot of stuff back in the day. So I think that, we're going to have to just, we always do what's easy and comfortable. And we're going to have to come up with some new strategies for sharing this information. Even, get a VHS player and make a VHS tape and then hand. I'm kidding, but it is getting it's getting to the point.
A puppet show.
There we go. We'll go around. We'll do the traveling puppet show. Who knows where we'll have to lead here? But
turn it into a poem. Turn it into a song. Like I don't know any of this stuff. So just be inspired and use your gifts.
Yeah, absolutely. And YouTube, I've also had issues with uploading to YouTube, but I will try again. Anyways, I am working on other avenues, but don't just like say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. What everybody always say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. Why don't you help me and help us? Right, help us get this out there. Make a copy of it, and help us do it as well. So, yeah, give me advice, but don't just stop there. So that's all I'm saying.
Take it and run.
Yeah, for sure. Anyhow, thanks a lot, everyone. And we'll see you again tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm in Denver, so it'll be 1 p.m. for me. And you can just check my Argus Fest channel and or our Facebook pages, and you should be able to find whatever link that we have going. Any final words, Alison?
No, just come back tomorrow. More graphene.
All right. Well, we'll see you. We'll see you then. Thanks. Ah.